All right, I call this meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter.
I'm here.
Councilmember Austin Lane. Councilmember Barry. Councilmember Clay.
Here.
Councilmember Elridge. Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
All right, we do have a quorum of the council, and as I said, I expect that the two of the remaining council members will be joining us shortly. First item on the agenda is council comments or announcements. Are there any council comments or announcements? Bruce?
Yeah, I just wanted to say briefly that I find the improved new hire update very helpful, that staff provides information on new employees in the city, and I wasn't sure how widely that gets distributed, whether it's just the paper copy, whether it goes on the web. I'm not sure, but I know it's very helpful for people to know who it is that they're contacting.
I know it's circulated.
You have to use, can you use your mic, Wayne? There you go.
It is circulated through staff and council. Whether we're putting it on the web, I don't know, but I'll check, and if we're not, I think it's a good idea.
Well, lots of people know I've hardly been around for the last 6 weeks. I've had one of those kind of months, lots of things happening in my life. But one of the good things that happened is that I just came back from a one-week sustainable building conference that one of my groups from HUD put together in the Pacific Northwest, and learned lots of new things about green building and sustainable technology that I'm kind of looking forward to sharing with folks in Tacoma Park. And I will actually be here in Tacoma Park for the next 60 days at least. So I'm looking forward to staying home and talking to some of the people and catching up with people in my ward that haven't had that much service from me over the last 6 weeks.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. We don't have any additional agenda items. I would ask the council's indulgence on the adoption of the minutes. I have not had a chance to look at the minutes, and so I'm going to ask if we can postpone. Jesse has been very good about keeping us up to date on minutes, and some of us have been less good on reviewing them promptly. So if the council, if there's no objection on the council, we will postpone those until next week. The next item on the agenda is the public comment period. This is the time set aside on the agenda for comments on items that are not on our regular meeting agenda. If you have a comment on one of the items on our regular meeting agenda, I'd ask if you would hold those comments until we get to that item. But this would be the time for comments on items that are on our work session agenda, as well as any other topic you'd like to bring before the council. And when you come up to make your comments, I would ask if you would identify yourself, and if you keep your comments to 3 minutes, and we will have a little light on the podium that will let you know when you're approaching your last minute and when your 3 minutes are up. That is to ensure that everybody gets an opportunity to speak. Are there any comments at the public comment period? Anyone would like to speak at the public comment period? Please come up to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Scott Stewart. I'm a resident of Laurel, Maryland, but I serve as the Director of Marketing and Communications at Columbia Union College. Randall Wisby is out of town, sends his regrets and his regards, and I may ask for, if I don't read quickly enough for you, minutes.
I beg pardon?
I may ask for 4 minutes, if necessary, to go through my comments.
My understanding is that the issue that you wanted to address actually is one of the items on the regular meeting agenda.
It's related to...
It's related to it, but not exactly the same.
And with Jessie's recommendation, she said this portion of the meeting may be more appropriate than waiting until later.
Okay. Why don't you then go ahead?
Are pretty narrow with regard to that administrative
okay.
item. Thank you. Columbia Union College treasures Sligo Creek, much like everybody else here in Tacoma Park does. Students, faculty, and staff use the park and its environment on a daily basis. And the park and the creek have been the beneficiary of our annual service day every October. It's a day when students and staff take a day off from our academic pursuits and get out into the community to do work with landscaping and environmental issues and helping agencies in the area. And again, this fall, we hope to partner with, and we've discussed with Marty Ittner, partner with Friends of Sligo Creek so we can again have them as one of our groups that benefit from our efforts in October. CUC is and continues to operate within the scope of its state-issued stormwater permit, Recent administrative action brought against CUC by the Maryland Department of Environment includes 11 or 12 infractions, the bulk of which were administrative paperwork problems. Over the last 4 years, there have indeed been a couple of unfortunate mistakes attributable to CUC, and for that we are truly sorry. To say there have been 4 years of documented discharges could mislead people to think we have been completely and chronically negligent, gross polluters, and that's not the case. And to hear that out would be a terrible misinterpretation of that statement. Our practices have changed. Staff training on environmental issues have improved. Contractors are on notice with regard to our stringent standards, and critical drains have been capped or rerouted. Paperwork has been brought up to date, and the problems essentially have been taken care of. And we're working toward total resolution on all of these issues as quickly as we can. We have been working closely with the state through this process. We've been meeting regularly, and we'll be meeting again very soon with Administrative Judge, the MDE, attorneys, engineers, and how to discuss and proceed to remediate the remaining issues. We don't have a specific timetable or cost estimate at this time. It's a process adjudicated by a state administrative judge, and as you can imagine, that's not something you can rush along. But we are cooperating completely, and we have been taking the actions that have resolved nearly all the sources of possible discharges. In fact, we don't even wash our bus in the parking lot anymore, even with environmentally friendly soap. What now comes out of our storm drain, which we still share with Washington Adventist Hospital, is basically runoff. There has been a number tossed around in this community of about $250,000 required to remediate all of the problems. That's an old number from a former contracted employee at the college. It appears that maybe less than half of that could be closer to accurate, and we certainly hope that's the case. For CUC, every dollar counts. And total resolution will not come cheaply, but reducing or eliminating any fine associated with this would be a great help to the college. Should oversight and enforcement change with regard to the administrative action you'll be taking this evening, we'll continue to work closely with whatever agency is ultimately the authority in the case. But our goal naturally is that there will be no more issues to have to address. Environmental stewardship is part of the core values at Columbia Union College, and we've taken these allegations very seriously, knowing that some substances have left our campus that are not healthy for Sligo Creek, and for that we are truly sorry. We love our community and would never intentionally do it harm. For more than 100 years, Columbia Union College has been a good neighbor in Tacoma Park. Marty Ittner and the Friends of Sligo Creek should be applauded for their diligence and their watch care, and we look forward to working even more closely with them in the future, especially this fall. Sligo Creek and the park are a treasure to all of us, and working together to care for them, we'll continue to have the kind of environment that makes CUC and Tacoma Park proud. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comments. We very much appreciate your coming and bringing that to us. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to comment before we get to the public hearings? Any other comments? All right. We will move on to the next item, which is the city manager's comments, and then we will move to the public hearing.
I have one quick announcement. There is a cooling center at Progress Place in Silver Spring for homeless persons. It's open during the day, so if you know of anyone who's in that plight, please refer them there. The Progress Place is located at 8210 Colonial Lane in Silver Spring. I do have some information to pass on for about the community center. Last Wednesday, we ran a test on the balloon as part of the water runoff system at the front of the front parking lot. The balloon inflated as required. There was some difficulty in deflating it, and the Knott Company is going back to the manufacturer to see if we can't find a better way to deflate the flood balloon. Also, we noticed that there was a lot of sediment and dirt in the trough that houses the balloon, and JFK is looking at some way of preventing that, if at all possible. We will be meeting, staff will be meeting with JFK Knott next Thursday to go over a number of unresolved issues and try to get those resolved, and we'll give you a report on that. We're also meeting with TRG next Tuesday to finalize the punch list and other pending issues on the new community center. And the restoration of the police department from the flood damage, which happened before the construction, but which we put off, is now, it will start tomorrow. The police have been, a lot of the police have been relocated to the trailers on the parking lot, and it's anticipated that that project should be completed by August the 4th. That's all I have.
Any council questions of the city
Is there air
manager?
conditioning in those trailers? Because I was in the rec
Yes.
department trailer the other day, and it was stifling.
There is air conditioning units. in
And
the
are they
trailer.
turning it on?
That I don't know. But there are. We had people in there last summer.
Terry?
Yes, sir.
What's the status, or what's the plan for the air conditioning within this building, the upstairs where it's not working?
The plan is we're going to get some bids and come to council to put in additional air conditioning. It's a design error. It's not an error, as best we can tell at this point. It's a design error. And it's, the long-range solution is to get a contractor in and put in the adequate conditioning system, add to it. The short-term system is we're using those little space coolers, which are unsightly, but they're helping. And we may add a few more.
And that was an existing system in the existing part of the building?
Yes. Yeah, that was not a new system. It's the old system, but we were led to believe that it was adequate to cool off that area, and
It's
it
not
obviously
doing
is
that.
not.
Any other questions? All right. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a series of public hearings. The first public hearing regards the residential permit parking that's proposed for Prince George's Avenue, Conway Avenue, Belford Place, Belford Drive, and New Hampshire Avenue. If anyone has a comment they would like to make on that proposal, please come up to the podium. This is on the residential permit parking.
Sign-up sheets?
Are there sign-up sheets?
Yes, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe. Apologies, I understand that there are sign-up sheets. Since there are sign-up sheets, what we'll do is we will take people in the order that they've signed up, and then at the conclusion of the list of people who've signed up, I will take anyone else who wishes to speak. So everyone who wants to speak will get their 3 minutes. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate it. Sometimes we have sign-up sheets and sometimes we don't, so I apologize for not realizing this is one of the times that we did. The first person is Sandra Filippi, followed by Barry Bull. Sandra?
Hi, I'm Sandra Filippi. I live at 501 Belford Place, and I'm in the area that was petitioned for parking, and I'd like to speak in support of that. I feel very strongly that our neighborhood needs 24/7, 365 residential parking so that our residents have a place to park. A wide majority of the homes do not have off-street parking, and when they come home in the evening, they have no place to park. Many of our residents are elderly, and this is an inconvenience at the least for them. Those of us that do have off-street parking often find our driveways blocked and unable to get our vehicles in and out. Other people are going to speak to crime. I've lived at my home with my husband since August 10th, 1990, and crime has always been a problem for us, so we really appreciate it if you would consider our petition. And I have another point of view that I'd like to express. The people that we're trying to discourage parking in our neighborhood primarily live in Belford Towers across New Hampshire Avenue. And I have seen mothers and fathers dragging children, put it in strollers by hand across 6 lanes of traffic every morning and every night, cars going 50 miles an hour just so that they can park there when they have a secure parking space in their apartment complex. It's very distressing to me. I'm very fearful for their well-being and safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barry Bull, to be followed by Larry Sanders.
Thank you. My name's Barry Bull. I live at 501 Belford Place. I also would like to strongly encourage the council to take the special consideration for 24/7, 365. We are willing to pay to get parking permits simply because the people in Belford Towers are not willing to pay to get parking permits for their own parking lots. We have probably one of the largest taxi cab stands in Montgomery County parked around us. Anytime you go out there, we have airport shuttle vans parked out there. We have anywhere from 5 to 10 taxi cabs parked out there. There is no place to park on the weekends. You come home after 8, 9 o'clock, there's no parking, simply because the people in Belford Towers tell their friends, park over there. That way we won't have to pay for a guest permit for you. It's a quality of life issue, is what it comes down to. We're willing to pay so they can't park there because they're not willing to pay so they can park in by their own home. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry Sanders, to be followed by Josh Prentice.
Yes, my name's Larry Sanders. I'm talking for my father, Arthur Sanders, that lives at 6703 Prince George Avenue. At the present, he's bedridden and he needs 24/7 nursing care. And whenever the shift changes for the nursing, sometimes there's no parking in front of the house, and the nurses have to park a block or two away to come to work or take care of my father. And occasionally on weekends or during the day, we have to take him to the doctors occasionally, and there's parking in front of our house. We got to wheel him down the street a little bit, and it's really aggravating to can't be parked in front of your own house.
All right, thank you. It looks like Joshua Prentice.
Joshua Prentice.
Okay, that'd be followed by Angela and Herman Buma.
This is Joshua Prentice. I live at 6710 Conway Avenue. I've been there for about a year and a half now. I have a few comments to make. First of all, in general, I do not like permit parking. I believe it's a hassle having to get guest permits, and I'm actually ADHD, and I've got a stepfather who's ADHD, and to try to get an ADHD person to remember to get a guest parking on somebody else's car, it can be a real pain. And what if somebody drives off with something? And also, I have a mortgage, and I don't live in an apartment complex, and I feel like since I live in a house, in a community, there's that parking, permit parking is unnecessary. Now, that all said, I signed the petition for permit parking. Why did I do that? Two reasons, two basic reasons. The first reason is, like I said, I've been here for a year and a half, and I have a 94-year-old neighbor, John Furman, who was the original buyer of his house in 1945. So he's very elderly, and he said he wanted to sign the petition twice. And other people on my street have also, who have lived here for a while, felt like they want to have permit parking. And since I was, a rookie, basically, I felt like I didn't have as much say as somebody who's been here for a long time. I felt like, their thoughts should be respected and their decisions should be respected, and I didn't care so much. But that wasn't enough for me to sign. The reason why I signed was because then I put out a question, and I said, what percentage of the people on that one block of Prince George's what percentage of those cars should not be there? What percentage of those cars are not cars that belong to anybody who lived there? And I found out, I can't remember exactly, but like 85, 90%. And I was like, okay, well, 85, 90% being dispersed out, and I live basically 2 blocks away. That's a huge number to consider, and that's a huge percentage of people who could easily just park on my street. And so that's something I definitely don't want. And I also finally wanted to state that it seems to me that one of the biggest problems of this whole thing is the aforementioned towers, the apartment complex across New Hampshire Avenue. And it seems to me that this whole process could easily be gotten rid of if we could figure out a way to talk to these people and try to get their parking straightened out. Because a neighbor of mine drove over there at midnight and found several nights in a row and found a whole bunch of parking spaces not used up, completely empty, and only a few that were filled.
Okay, thank you. Can you wind up?
Yeah, so anyway, that's just what I'd like to say, and I could go either way, but I can see both sides of the story.
Okay, thank you very much. Angela and Herman Buma, to be followed by Milo Bannerman.
I'm Angela Bauma from 6704 Conway Avenue, and I'm speaking against these parking permits. Some of the reasons were just expressed. First, because of all the hassle, the red tape, and we feel that we are being punished because of other people's problems. And I wish that we could work somehow with Belfort Towers for them to change their policies so that the people could park in their own space and not in our space. So basically, I'm just opposing this petition, although if everybody else around us is going to have, and then we might need for us as well. So, but that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Boomer, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, my name is Herman Balma, and just say ditto to everything my wife said, and maybe just emphasize a couple points. I generally, as a matter of principle, I'm against government red tape, and I just think it would be a hassle to have to get not only the regular permits, but then if you're going to have a party, I guess you got to get permits for your guests. And I think it's, at least in our neighborhood, it would be an unnecessary hassle. We've lived in our street for almost 26 years. We do have problems from time to time with parking, but generally we're able to deal with it. I would like to affirm what my wife said. If you all decide to go with this residential permit parking, then we certainly would want Conway Avenue included then. Otherwise, I guess all the people who couldn't park on the other streets would come to our street. But just one final point. I noticed the memo from the SOSCA Citizens Association says that the resolution was passed unanimously. I'm not quite sure why it was reported that way, since my wife and I were at the meeting and we were opposed to this proposal. So
Okay.
I would recommend you vote against this, but if you decide to go forward, then include our block also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Milo Bannerman, to be followed by Mike Green.
Good evening. I'm Milo Bannerman. I live at 6726 Conway. Our area of the neighborhood doesn't even have a problem. It is non-existent. It's just not there. I empathize and sympathize with my neighbors down on Prince George's. There is a problem there. It needs to be resolved. There's going to be somebody killed crossing New Hampshire Avenue. I know there was already a fatality a while ago. You know, we pay a lot of city taxes. Why isn't the city doing something in some formal, official manner? Colleen, I know you've checked with those people over there. Why aren't y'all doing something to stop this so that we don't have these regulations on our lives? I am totally against this, as are a lot of my neighbors. We are being affected by something that right now has nothing to do with us. My block has no problem. Nothing. If we have a party, what are we going to do? We're going to have to get permits for everybody? I have 2 cars. My daughter has a car. I have a boat. You're going to have me get permits for all my vehicles? I have neighbors that have scooters. Are they going to have to do it? What happens when you get to, the end of Conway? They're going to park on Circle. If you feel like this is a never-ending thing, or if they're just going to move, what are you going to do about Circle Avenue? What are you going to do about Woodland Avenue? What are you going to do about Upper Prince George's? I mean, we can go on and on. Why am I being affected by a very small area of our neighborhood's problem? And these petitions have gone out. Certain people have signed them, and I empathize with the people that have the problem, but they're making it our problem. And we don't need this. The city should do something about this. They can do something by taking some type of action or putting the pressure on Belford Towers. It's a real simple thing here to focus in a different direction instead of putting the burden on us. We pay a ton of taxes. Our taxes in Tacoma Park are some of the highest in the nation. Number one, who's going to enforce this parking at 10 or 11 or 12 o'clock at night? It's Tacoma Park Police. You're going to have to pay for extra police. It's going to cost more money. Are neighbors going to start reporting neighbors for parking after hours, for having, what if I have a party and I have an impromptu something? Hey, everybody come over. Am I going to have to worry about them getting a ticket at night? It's absurd. This is like you're asking for a snowball solution here. You're throwing mud at a wall. Let's isolate the problem and go after it instead of, it's going to spread. It's going to spread to Circle. It's going to spread to Woodland.
All right, thank you for those thoughts. Let's see, Mike Green, followed by Tony Cranwinkle.
Good evening, Mike Green, resident of 6722 Conway Avenue, a few houses from Marlowe. Everything he said I go along with. It has not affected, I have no off-street parking, and I've never had no problem in parking. I have 4 vehicles, which includes my daughter. I have yet to have a problem. Now, there are people there that we do have parties, whatnot, and we usually park in front of our house, but if it's a party, we'll park elsewhere. Other than that, we have no problem. I think this is a bit too much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mike Green Tony Cranwinkle to be followed by, I think it's Jennifer Liebrich, and I apologize if I'm mangling your name.
You said it right. Hello. I live at 502 Belford Place. I've been there since more or less 1989. And I've had a few confrontational problems. My neighbor across the street, which he doesn't live there anymore, he had a fight over this parking matter. My son, he's a special boy. His bus comes and picks him up right in front of our walkway on the street, right in front of our walkway. And we've asked, in a nice, kind way to others that have parked there, hey, can you please move it, or move it up a little bit, or move it back a little bit, so because my son has special needs, and that way he can walk to his bus. But they don't pay attention. They're stubborn, and I'm talking mostly from people at 502 Belford Towers. They're the main culprit. And you ask them in a nice way, and they laugh at you. And it's been confrontational a few times, and it's surprising I haven't duked it with anyone, and actually we shouldn't be doing that, but unfortunately, it could lead to that. And then, of course, there's a crime that's been mentioned. There's been a few cars that have been violated. They steal radios, because those people just start walking around now, and right off the bat they start seeing things. Not only that, there's plenty of litter. I've caught many, they just park on the side there, start drinking, and throw their beer cans, throw their beer bottles right in our yard. I'm right there in a corner. And I would definitely like to see some kind of resolution. It's a catch-22 situation. I feel for others that really don't have a problem with their parking, but what's going to happen if we do get parking in those little streets from New Hampshire Avenue, then it's going to filter to your houses as well. And that's very unfortunate. That's why we have to have a nice little area, so to speak, so that way they won't be walking and hovering around. And just like I mentioned, there's plenty of taxi cabs, but never when you need one, but they're there. And that's all I have to say. And I actually am 95 or 99% Sure. I will go for this parking sticker. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer, I think it's Liebrich to be followed by Charles McNamara or McNamara or something. I apologize for not getting names right.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Liebrich. I live at 6708 Prince George's Avenue. This is the block right off of New Hampshire Avenue. I'm the person who circulated the petition to begin with, and actually 100% of our block is for parking permits. We are, I'd say, along with New Hampshire, the access road in Belford, we bear the brunt of most of the non-residential parking. I've lived there for 4 years, and I go back and forth on this. I really appreciate Milo's comments, and I think that the council should take action to help the folks living at Belford Towers. They're low-income people that can't afford to buy a parking permit from Belford Towers. That's why they're parking in our neighborhood. Feel badly for them, but for a lot of other reasons, I would like to have parking permits in our neighborhood while you also pursue action with the PG County and Belford Towers residents. I also would like to note that there was a street across New Hampshire that used to be that Belford Towers folks would park on, but they have made that parking permit, so that's why we've had a lot of influx over here. I have, I guess, 3 main reasons: crime and safety concerns. We've had the neighbor of mine that helped me write this petition has had her house and her car broken into 4 times, and her car was finally stolen on the 4th time because there was a car in front of her house where the people were drinking and smoking pot, and she decided not to call the police because we have called the police so many times on these cars. And then the folks in that car jumped in her truck and stole it. So I call the Coma Park Police about on a weekly basis to report suspicious activity in the cars on my block. It ranges from stolen vehicles, just from people looking suspicious and it turning out to be a stolen vehicle or stolen tags, to the trash, which sounds like not such a problem, but we are the street that has a big triangle-shaped median in front of our house, and the folks that don't live in our neighborhood and they park in our neighborhood think that, oh, let me just dump my McDonald's bag out the side, and myself and my neighbors end up picking up that park really regularly, along with Tacoma Park yard services, but it's a not insignificant problem. Public urination has been an issue. Many of us have seen folks coming back from parties at Belford Towers on the weekend, then come back to their car and pee in our neighborhoods, on our house, in my backyard, you name it. On their own vehicles, actually, they also have. And the big reason, of course, inadequacy of on-street parking. Actually, only one person has off-street parking on our block. And it's the elderly man who has nurses coming too, so they need street parking as well. And I would finally like to say this is especially problematic on nights and weekends, and the petition is only for Monday through Friday, and I would also ask that it be weekends 24/7. Thanks.
Thank you. Charles, it looks like McNamara, but I apologize if I... I said McNamara, is that right? McNamara. Okay, I was righter when I took another try at it, huh?
Like Robert S.
Okay.
I'd stand in favor of the petition to have parking permits along that area. And I would say that the people who are coming into our neighborhood are not really our neighbors. They live across the New Hampshire Avenue, which seems like a small space to travel, and like they would be neighbors, but they're not in spirit. They come here to our neighborhood because it's cheap, because it's convenient. So the only way that we can keep people out who don't care about our neighborhood is to either make it expensive, which we can do if we have a ticketing system, or inconvenient. And so what I would say is, if you're going to extend parking permits to the small area represented by the petition, that you do include other one-side parking streets in that area. I live at 6800 Prince George's Avenue. It's one side of the street parking. If you have permit parking on Conway and Belford, I think it's almost certain that, I'm sorry, Prince George's and Belford, that it's almost certain that Conway and 6800 Prince George's Avenue will indeed be affected. The problem will spread. As I said, they park there because it's convenient. So let's make it inconvenient for them by establishing a radius around that area which is convenient to them. Move it all the way to Elm if you have to. Move it past Elm, up towards Woodland if you have to. But let's get the parking under control, because right now it is not. My house, it's not so bad. I'll have off-street parking. I stand in sympathy with those on Belford because they are absolutely right. On the weekends, every single street space is taken, legal and illegal. There is no place to park. Driveways are blocked. I can't even get down the street on Belford on the weekends. I have to go down an extra block, which is not a big deal for me. But if I lived on that street, I'd be furious. Okay? So let's get permit parking in the places where it is convenient for people to poach on our neighborhood. Let's get the permit parking there until it's inconvenient for them to do so, and they move back to the free spaces at Belford Place. I'm sorry, at Belford Towers. I understand that it's not entirely free parking for them, but again, it's our neighborhood. We live there. We pay for the homes, the mortgages, the rent. We're entitled to park in front of our own houses. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for people's information, the way the system works is in order to put permit parking on a particular block, we have to have a petition signed by the people on that block. So the council's not able to extend it beyond the areas that have been petitioned. But if the areas that are beyond those that are petitioned would like to extend permit parking to their areas, they can petition their blocks too, and those can be added. But because there is inconvenience for the people who live on that block, we don't do it on blocks that don't ask by petition. But thank you. I don't believe so, because it gets too cumbersome for the police to tell where the permits.
Conway, 1,600 block of Conway is 2 blocks, and it's the way it's set up. And the lower half is
Generally, we do it block by block. I've got one more person on my list, so let me finish the list. Susie Stimler, to speak on this issue.
Hello, my name is Susie Stimler. I live at 6715 Conway Avenue, and ironically, I'm the one person on Upper Conway who has a driveway. However, I stand in favor of this parking permit regulation, and I'm willing to go through the minor hassle of getting permits for myself and my guests. I think this is a neighborhood problem that needs a neighborhood solution, and I think it affects enough of my neighbors that I need to support it. And also just to speak to the concerns of some of my neighbors who think this is a major hassle. As a stay-at-home mom who parks throughout Tacoma Park in permit-only zones during the day, it has not been a big problem to get guest permits or waive parking restrictions for playgroups or the like. So I don't see that as a problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the residential permit parking proposal? Yes, sir. Would you like to go to the podium?
Good evening. My name is Cecil Glasgow. I live at 6800 New Hampshire, next door to Tony. Although Tony's address is on the other street, but I live right next door to Tony. I've been living there for 18 years, and I welcome the opportunity of speaking on this matter because it certainly has escalated. All that Tony has said is true. We are suffering from a situation which basically starts across the street at Belford Towers. I don't know what is the problem there, but apparently the tenants either do not have permission to have parking or they do not want to buy parking permits. The problem has escalated in recent times. The fact of the matter is that right now they have become very rude, abusive, and what have you. We, on the little access road, as I call it, have felt neglected for a very long time. The street is not swept. The street is in a state of disrepair, and everything else that matters about it is in evidence. First, I think that every day that I get up, I have to go out there and clean the trash. And like Tony said, they're throwing anything and everything. Beer bottles, this, the lot. You think about it, it's there. Secondly, we resorted to the use, we on that little aspect road, we resorted to the use of some markers, some cones. And what is happening now is that they have become so disrespectful. They remove the cones and park anywhere. And on weekends, it's all hell break loose because you don't have any place to park. I really never bothered because I actually have a parking lot. I'm the only person down there that actually has a concrete strip to park on. Recently, however, I was doing some works in my yard, and the concrete strip has been utilized. The one night that I came in late and couldn't find a place to park, and park at the end where I see people parking regularly, by next morning, 6 o'clock, I had 2 parking tickets. To me, that's a ridiculous state of affairs. I am not sure exactly what is meant by the flyer that came out about the purchase of permits, but it is in agreement with what another speaker said. It is placing hardships on people who have already been paying a whole lot of taxes and what have you, and really are not getting the benefit of what we think we need to get. I know there are people who came here and said the problem is not theirs, in that they live too far inward. But we're right there across the street from Belfort Towers, and you see them parking their vehicles, moving the cones, parking their vehicles and walking across at Belfort Towers like they live where we are supposed to park.
Yes, can you wind up?
Excuse me?
Can you wind up your comments?
Good. Because we have a permit, I have never really taken the matter at issue. Not a permit, a drive-in. But like I said, in recent times, even just trying to utilize some space that was available, I got myself 2 tickets. What I think,
can you wind up, please?
I'm winding up.
Okay.
What I think basically is that the council need to do something about Bedford Towers. That's where the problem starts. That's where the problem should end. They are the people who are causing us the problem that we are getting, and they really should be the ones that should be penalized, not us.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue?
My name is Kathleen Long. I live at 6724 Conway Avenue. As my neighbors both on either side of me both said, this is not an issue in the part of Conway where I live. However, I agree with Susie that it is a neighborhood issue, and I think it's one that we need to address as a neighborhood. So I did sign the petition. I am in support of parking permits for the 6700 block of Conway Avenue. But I do have a couple of questions for the council, and that is, Milo brought up that Belfort Towers needs to take care of this issue. I was wondering if there was anyone on the council or anyone in the city who has been in touch with Belfort Towers management. What has come of that contact? And if there hasn't been contact, could there be contact in the future? I'd like to put that out there and you know, hear back.
I can answer.
And then my other question is, if we do go forward with parking permits, can there be such a thing as a photocopy party permit, so that if you're going to have a party, you just do up a photocopy that you give to all your guests when they come, saying, I'm having a party on Saturday night, this date. People can just stick in their dashboard, and nobody will get a ticket. So I think there could be a common sense solution to that. But I would like to hear about what interaction there has been with the management of Belfort Towers.
I think there has, and I'm going to let Councilmember Clay answer that. But in answer to your second question, we don't permit people to photocopy the guest permits
No,
for
but like
obvious
just a
reasons.
special party permit.
But what you can do is, if you're having a party, you can call the police department and let them know, and they will, what they call, extend courtesy for a period of time. So that's usually the way it's handled.
I have made numerous attempts to contact the management in Belfort Towers. They're actually out of New Jersey. I know they have a Baltimore office, but they actually manage this property out of New Jersey. And they've made appointments to talk to me over the phone, and they break every appointment. They're really non-receptive. And so then I've gone over and I've spoken to the management over there, not particularly receptive, talked to a lot of the people who live there. There are a lot of problems in that place overall. The parking is believe it or not, a small part of the problems that are happening. And so I have not made attempts to contact the Belford Towers people in probably 6 to 8 weeks at this point, because I've been working on some other issues. But when I was at the Maryland Municipal League activities with the council, I took every opportunity I could to catch people in Prince George's County to find out who it is I would have to speak to in Prince George's County, and start to strategize with some of those folks about some code enforcement approaches, looking through economic development issues and trying to sort of a carrot and a stick kind of approach in working with the folks. And that's where I'm at right now, is pursuing that avenue. I'm not particularly hopeful about getting a positive response out of the Belford Towers management, but I haven't given up either. I'm just kind of focusing in a different area right now.
And I had one other question just on the permits. Is there such a thing as a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week permit?
There is not at this point, but one of the issues that I understand people want to bring before the council is whether we could extend our regulations to do that. And it is possible the council would have to change the ordinance that we have now, but that's something that the council could do if it wanted to.
And so if we sign up for permits, right now the permits would only be for working hours, so that really wouldn't address our issue of weekends and evenings. So
there is such a thing as a 5-day-a-week, 24-hour-a-day permit. And my understanding is that what the council could do right now would be to put you on that kind of a permit system, and then address the issue of extending the amount of time that we could do, and at that point your permits could be extended. Now, we need to talk with I need to talk with the city manager and the police department about the time frame on that. But my understanding is that the police department could, in fact, we have 24-hour-day policing, and we could do that.
But there would be then probably another council meeting and another process to get it to be 7 days a week.
In order to change the ordinance, we would have to go through another process.
And that could take about how long?
It depends. I mean, I don't see us being able to do it immediately, simply because we have a number of things in front of us right now. But that is something that we could probably address this fall.
Okay.
A couple more things. Is it possible in the city, if you require disabled access in front of your house, to actually get a blue curb for disabled-only parking? That might be an option for some folks.
Yes, that is a possibility, and I think that's something that's under the city manager's purview.
So
yes, you can follow
if
up
that
on that.
meets some people's needs, you might consider that. Another thing that we might add to the 24/7 issue is a possibility in some areas of banning commercial vehicles overnight. I know that some places do that, or you might, specific classifications, I don't know if it's legal to break it down by classification and ban taxis overnight, but that might be another mechanism that is it's more specific and might get to a more specific element of what the issue is. And the last thing I wanted to say was that I think that the street in front of New Hampshire that was referred to as being in a state of disrepair is actually Prince George's. The boundary stops at the sidewalk, and isn't it true that both New Hampshire Avenue and those little inlet streets are Prince George's streets?
I think that's an issue that came up at the time we were doing street repair, and I don't remember what the answer is, but that's a question we can address to Public Works, because I believe that they had to address that when they did the street repairs, unless Wayne knows the answer off the top of his head. My recommendation would be that we include all of those issues when we have our work session discussion, because I do think there are a number of issues concerning this petition that the council should discuss, and then based on that discussion that we should decide how we want to move forward with it. But that is something that we do have on our agenda for later this evening. Is there anyone who would like to speak at the public hearing about the permit parking who has not yet spoken? All right, then I will call this public hearing to a close. As I said, we have a work session discussion for later this evening. It's listed on the agenda as at 9 o'clock, but we're running a bit late at this point, so it may be later than that. You can stay. You're welcome to stay for that. You can watch it on the cable channel. You can also get it streaming video on your computer if you would like, both live, and you can watch it later on. It will be archived. Streaming video on the Internet will be archived, so you can watch the discussion at a later point if you would like. And if you want to do that and you would like to communicate with myself or any of the other council members, you should feel free to do that also. All right. I now open the public hearing on the traffic calming measures for Conway. And I have a number of people who are signed up to speak on that issue. I have Herman and Angela Bauma. I have Joshua Prentice following them. Did you want to speak on this issue?
Yes. My name again is
Can
Herman
I
Bauma.
just stop you for a second? I appreciate that some people don't want to stay for the whole thing, but if you're leaving, if you could leave quietly, if you need to catch up with your neighbors, if you could do it outside the room so that the council can hear the people who are speaking on the next issue. Thank you.
I live at 6704 Conway Avenue. I've lived there, as I mentioned earlier, almost 26 years. And I'm speaking in opposition to this proposal to put, I understand it, 2 speed humps on our block of Conway Avenue. First of all, just as a matter of general principle, I'm against speed humps. I think if there is a problem with speeding, the response lies in better enforcement and not in basically punishing law-abiding citizens because of the sins of the lawbreakers. I mean, they are a hassle, they are an inconvenience, and I just don't think it's the right approach is to inconvenience citizenry in general rather than increasing enforcement. I might add, I don't really see that much of a problem with speeding on our block. And we have lived there almost 26 years. The second reason I'm against is because I think it does impair the speed with which emergency vehicles can respond. And thirdly, I think it makes the job of snowplows more difficult. If you do decide to approve this request, I would strongly urge that you go with what I understand are called flat top speed bumps. If you can have a speed bump that you can go over safely at the speed limit, then that makes a certain amount of sense. And that's something that I could live with.
Thank you. Joshua Prentice, followed by...
Well,
I'm
basically...
sorry, I didn't see you standing up. Go ahead.
Basically, I want to also endorse what my husband just said. And I'm against in principle as well. And I drive around all over the city, the county, and so on. And I think that we are building traps for ourselves. We are slowing down not only ourselves, but emergency vehicles. And if you are the sick person in an ambulance and you have to brake every time you go over a bump, can be very painful. I'm saying this because I have carried people after a surgery from the hospital to home, and it was a hard trip for all the bumps I had to go over. So I just feel concerned that the more obstacles we put on our way, the more we are building traps for ourselves in slowing down traffic and preventing the flow of traffic to be more normal. And I mean, not only in Conway because we don't have that much traffic, but in general. But thank you.
All right, thank you. The next person is Joshua Prentice, followed by Bilo Bannerman.
I would like to respectfully disagree with my neighbors. I feel speed humps are necessary on our street. Again, I'm at 6710 Conway Avenue. I have two boys. One's 4, one's 9. The 9-year-old is a special needs person. And neither one of them really understand the concept of what would happen if you get hit by a car yet. And I'm not the only person on my particular block with children. There are a lot of children on this block. A lot of them are young, too. And I do see speeding happening. I see people coming up the hill on Belford
and turning around. It's a great joyride. I could see myself wanting to do it as a teenager myself. Going up Belford Avenue and making a left and going straight down Conway Avenue and going around the bend. And they go pretty fast. And I've actually, my 4-year-old son was almost hit by one of these about a week ago. I think at least one, if not two speed humps on that street would be very helpful. And I also understand there are speed humps that not only allow you to go just the speed limit and be okay, which would be fine with me, but also, and it is a very narrow street, and our school bus comes down to pick up my older son because he is special ed right in front of our door. And so there is that problem. However, I do think that if you have a speed hump that can also fit a fire truck, I understand they have speed humps where a fire truck can easily go through it and not other cars. That would also help because that would also be a safety issue too. But I am in favor of it, and I hope you all support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Milo Bannerman, followed by Mike Green.
Milo Bannerman again. I'm not as vehemently opposed to the speed humps as I was the permit parking, primarily because of the amount of children in our neighborhood these days. But here again, I think that it is not an issue on our part of Conway. Conway is 2 sections. Listing us as 1 block is ridiculous. The dynamics between the 2 sections of Conway are completely different. My part of Conway, the upper part, is primarily flat. We have no parking. We have no speeding problems there. It's a 3-way, no stop yield, and overall we have not had any traffic problems whatsoever. And I feel very strongly that it does restrict emergency use. It can affect bicycles and any type of scooters, which seem to be growing daily in our neighborhood due to gas prices and people riding them. I think it becomes extremely more dangerous. Having said that, if the majority of the people in my neighborhood go for speed bumps, but I know some of them have, I would respectfully request that we get low speed humps, or the ones that are not so high that they can cause a safety issue. Thank you.
I have a question.
Thank you. Just to note, the speed humps, unlike permit parking, we have some flexibility since there's specific things. We can place them where we feel they would be most effective and where the folks in the neighborhood feel they would be most effective. So we have a little flexibility there.
I note that the possible sites that have been designated by the community are 6705 and 6713. Those are in the lower section, not the section that you're in, right?
Why can't you do that with permit parking? Why is there such a difference? Why can't we put permit parking in the lower end and then use it as an experiment? If it grows in our area, I'll be all for it. If the parking comes up our way, why do we have to be effective now?
Well, we can.
There is no bearing on us at this point in time, none whatsoever, except that we're going to have to pay more money for permit parking. That is the only bearing going on.
That might be something that we can discuss, but my understanding is the way the law is set out now, it goes block by block. Let's see. Mike Green to be followed by Jorge Torrente, and I apologize for messing up the name, but I can't quite get it. But Mike Green would be the next one. You've said your piece. Okay. Is it Jorge Torrente? At least, sir, you know who I'm talking about, right?
Yes, good evening. I live in 6718 Conway Avenue
Okay.
for at least 30 years. Okay. I don't have a problem with parking, really. But see, you put a ticket up in Prince George, I believe the people coming to our neighbor and they wanted parking in our neighbor. The other thing, it's a 5-day tickets don't work down over there because almost the people working daytime, in weekend, at the 5 o'clock they're parking around over there. how about I have two daughters, and they're not living with me. When they come and visit us, and they have a ticket or no?
He's asking if his daughters, if they come visit him, have to get a permit.
Each individual has to buy a permit for the people who live there. For visitors, you have a visitor's permit that you can give them while they're parking in front of your house, and then they have to give it back to you when they leave. That's the way they work.
Okay.
I think it's 2 guest permits per family, but don't hold me to that because I think I haven't checked with it for a while. There's we would have to get. I don't want to give you information that's not up to date, so we would need to check on that. Yep. Can we let the gentleman finish his?
Yeah, this is my problem, right? I think about when my 2 daughters come to my home, yeah, they got a ticket. This is not fair to us.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, I'm sorry, my English not too good, but.
Well, I appreciate. Could you clarify your name for me, please?
What you say?
Name.
My name Jorge Torriente.
Torrente.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Followed by.
It looks like someone who's here with you, your wife, Deborah Torriente?
Okay, so you just want to second that. Okay. And then Risa Shaw.
Good evening. I would like to actually speak on behalf of both streets that have put in for,
Okay.
because I'm going to say the same thing, put in for the speed humps.
Sure.
All of my neighbors know that I'm not a fan of speed humps or speed bumps, and I also understand people's desire to have them. So I actually want to speak on a couple of things. One is that, and it's basically about safety, and it's more about bicycle safety than anything else. There's a lot of people, I ride my bike all the time, and the speed humps on other streets such as Sycamore and Woodland are very dangerous for bicycles. And if you don't basically slow all the way down, you can be in big trouble. And I like to think of myself as being a fairly skilled bike rider, and I have to be really, really careful on those. So what I want to say is about the curvature of them, and I'm not an engineer, so I can't speak about what that looks like. And I didn't realize until tonight that there's actually a difference between what's been requested on Conway and on Woodland. And on Conway, it says the flat speed hump table, the flat top hump or speed table. And on Woodland, it says the speed hump. And I'm actually more concerned about the one on Woodland because it's a steeper grade. And the steeper grade with the higher curve on the speed hump is what presents more of a danger for bicyclists. So what I would like to ask, and I've spoken with Jesse Carpenter about this, as have I know a couple of other people, is that if they do go in, especially on Woodland, that one, that they be the flattest possible, and two, if they have the spikiness that comes near what is on Sycamore and Woodland, and even on Hickory, the newer ones on Hickory, that they have a bike lane placed in them that is basically flat or a lot less steep. And as an aside, I would like to sort of put that into people's minds as we think about these for other parts of the city as well. And the other thing that I want to point out is that for the Woodland, just for the sake of the record, and I mean no disrespect to Ritty or anyone else who collected the signatures, we all know that there's only 4 houses plus the 2 houses on the corners on that block of Woodland. And it's noted that some of those houses were vacant. But and they got all the signatures on that street. I'm not contesting that. The rest of those signatures, other than Perry and Michelle's at 400 Circle, and their house is also on Woodland, the rest of those signatures, because there's a lot of them, are all above Elm Street. So I just want to point that out, that that block has only, counting the corners, 6 houses, and that being on Circle Avenue, I'm on 404 Circle, and I'm more, I'm definitely affected by it, that those signatures belong to other blocks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a response to that as well.
You want to say something?
I have actually talked to the Public Works Director about how we might do speed bumps so that they're both accessible for people on bicycles and particularly for people in wheelchairs or on motorized scooters. And I think we have a potential solution for that, which I would actually like to try on the Woodland speed bumps. And I've spoken to several of the people in that area, and they're very supportive of the idea and would like to ensure that there's bicycle access. So I think those things cross over, and I think we'll be able to do that.
All right. Susie Stimler.
Again, I'm Susie Stimler at 6715 Conway Avenue, and I'd like to speak in support of the 2-speed hump solution with the placement at 6705 and 6713. In particular, I'd like to echo my neighbors' comments who've spoken about that left turn off of Belford onto Conway, which actually Belford intersects Conway between 6713 and 6715, my house, and watching cars take that very wide curve, which is fairly blind at high speed, especially given the number of children. There are 2 children under the 4 and under at 6713. And we live in a neighborhood with no sidewalks, so there really isn't a choice. If you want to put your kids in or out of your car and you don't have a driveway, which most of my neighbors don't, you need to be in the street at some point. And then for the lower speed hump at 6705, to me it makes the most sense due to the one-way situation and the number of cars that actually violate the one-way directional. And we've had cars come up that street at high rates of speed. And my hope would be is if someone mistakenly ended up going up the one-way in the wrong direction, the speed hump would at least slow them down. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue? This is the speed humps or bumps on Conway.
If there's no one else, I want one more thing. If there's no one else, I want to say one more thing.
Okay, because did you want to talk about this here?
No.
I was just going to note for the record that we also got a comment from, written comment from John Furman at 6708 Conway, who doesn't support speed humps but does support permit parking on Conway.
I wanted to note that there's a request in here for the speed table, which is different from a speed hump, and you can go over to a higher rate of speed. It's rated, I think, at 19 miles per hour. And if you want to look at different traffic calming measures and see what we're talking about and how they function, I believe that the website is the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which is www.ite.org, I think. You can Google it, but it'll show you the speed pumps, how they work, and how they're different from speed humps.
Okay. If there's no one else, I would call that public hearing to a close and open up the public hearing on the Woodland Avenue traffic calming. I have first Amina Batata, and again, apologies if I'm not pronouncing that right, to be followed by Risa Shaw.
Good evening. My name is Amina Batata, and I am living at 6805 Woodland. I'm, as Risa said, one of the 4 houses that sits fully on Woodland Avenue, and I've lived in Tacoma Park for about 8 months, and at that address for about 5 weeks now. So I'm fairly new, and I know already in the short time that I've lived there that there is a need for some type of traffic calming measure on that block. Soon after we moved in, our neighbor Joe suggested we park only on one side because cars coming over the hill have trouble seeing cars on one of the sides of the street, and they go fairly fast. That's what he told me, and he said that way they can see your car. So that was definitely a highlight to us. And then Riddy, who lives 2 doors down, who I understand is the one who wrote the petition, also mentioned that because Elm Street, that runs perpendicular to our street, has speed humps, that a lot of cars use Woodland as an alternate route because they don't have to deal with the speed humps going down the street. So I would certainly support a petition for a traffic calming measure. Like Risa, though, I also have a background. Well, I have a background in public health and child health, and do not advocate for the speed humps. I think, Councilmember Clay, what you're describing sounds a lot more appropriate. And when I did approach Riddy about that, who unfortunately is unable to make it tonight, she's on a vacation, but is very concerned. She didn't have any plans. She just said, we need to calm the traffic too. So I don't think that that's necessarily, I think that her petition was more for traffic calming and less for necessarily the particular type of measure that would be taken. So I'm also, when I'm not pregnant, an avid cyclist and would advocate for some type of route through the hump bump, whatever it is, or a tabletop, which would be great. So I encourage you all to support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Risa Shaw, again.
Thank you for Xeroxing my comments into this one, too.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the Woodland Avenue traffic calming proposal? All right. Seeing no one, I will again tell you all that we are going to be having a council discussion of all these three proposals during our work session, which will be following a few other items of business. If you would like to stay, you're more than welcome to stay. If you don't want to stay, you can either watch it on the cable channel. It will be broadcast live as well as rebroadcast several times during the week. You can also get it through the internet on streaming video on the city's website. You can again watch that live, or it will be archived for you to watch at any time in the future you would like to watch it. And if you'd like to get comments to any member of your council, to me, to Colleen, to anyone else on the council, you should feel free to do that. All right. We will now call that public hearing to a close and move on to a series of interviews that we have. And I'd like to apologize to the members of the various committees that we're interviewing for the delay in getting to your interviews. There was a great deal of interest in these permit parking and traffic calming petitions, and I'm very happy to see everyone here and participating, but it does mean that we're getting to the other things a bit late. We have a couple of interviews for Arts and Humanities Commission, Randy Cohen and Sandra Grady. Okay, there you are. Do you want to come sit up here at the table? Now, both of you have been on the commission. We're delighted to see that you're volunteering to continue. And I just wanted to see if there's anything that you would like to share with us in terms of what the commission's doing, what you might like to see it doing in the future, anything that you think the council should be doing in terms of the commission. I would leave it up to you to share any of those thoughts with us.
Well, as you said, having been with the commission since its beginning, I just thinking that it is just beginning. We've begun a number of projects with the cultural plan, and also I'm particularly interested in the Tacoma Park Poet Laureate, which, he has instituted a series of poetry readings, and these are really involving members of the community, and it's just really working extremely well. So I just look forward to seeing how everything unfolds over the next 3 years, and then I think I'll be ready to give it up.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a very enjoyable 3 years, and I look forward to 3 more years. It's the first couple of years, it was a lot of setup and infrastructure building and a lot of hard work and community engagement with the cultural plan. But now as the programs have rolled out, and the poetry readings and the Poet Laureate and the exhibitions here in the municipal building, and just a number of the other programs, projects, murals, public art work, a lot of these things are starting to come to fruition. Things are moving a lot faster now, and I think the council's done a great job with populating the commission. We kind of went through a turnover over the last year, and it's really an excellent group of people that are assembled, very dedicated. So I just say thanks for all the support, and we look forward to more support from all of you. And, it's a lot of fun. It's the hot one to be in.
I'm so glad that it is the hot group to be in. I feel like that you as charter members have really made it that. And I thank you for all your energy, all your ideas, and I really don't have anything beyond thank you to say. But Sandra, I think you've really come forward with a great idea and seen it through in the Poet Laureate. And I've really enjoyed Don Berger's presentations at many events, and the series that he's doing now. It's just terrific. And Randy, you really got things off the ground by being the first chair of the committee, and we wouldn't be where we are now if you hadn't decided you could lead it and used your expertise to make so many good things happen. So I really appreciate you all sticking with it, and hopefully you just won't ever be able to let go.
Thank you, Mayor Porter, and thank you both for your continued interest in the Arts and Humanities Commission. I'd be curious to hear from both of you about where you really see the Commission, what do you see the Commission doing to try to engage more of the community members in the arts and humanities?
Well, I think more of the public art projects, if that's possible, if funding can be found as work is done on bricks and mortar, or some of the murals, with some of the cement kind of, we've got some big cement wall types of spaces, and those are great opportunities to engage the community and get them to participate. We've talked about things like another round of the community murals project. Just something that's worked before and to do more of. There's plans in the works for open studios, and maybe and also talking to as a way to sort of help people understand the where arts and the humanities are being created, nurtured here, and touring that around, and tying into a historic Tacoma, and so we've got some of those things in the work as well. So to help people really sort of understand what's right there in the community. There's a couple of things.
Yeah, I think that in engaging citizens with the spoken word, with visual art, in all the things that we're doing, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of activities, I think that we're actively getting the citizens out to participate. People like to share their work, whether it's a visual, the sculpture, the exhibitions here in the community center, the poets, all of those things. I think these activities are drawing people into the arts and really making people more aware of their own contributions. People love to. I've noticed that the poetry readings, they really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share their work, and so I think that activities like that will continue to evolve. And I just see us there's so many projects. We just really are busy brainstorming a lot, and just a lot of things on the table. So a lot of activities, I think.
We also like to push deeper into some of the parks and recreation programs. I think more work needs to be done in the schools. Obviously there's bigger stages there, but we're connecting with your county agencies and with the state agencies, and seeing over time if we can start to make change there as well.
Since tonight is about interviewing you for the commission, it's really not a review of the commission itself. I wonder, again, for both of you, what would you really like to achieve during the next 3 years with the commission?
I would like to. I'm a writer, and I teach writing, and I'm most interested in the written word, although I've grown to appreciate other forms of art over the last several years. And I think that one of the things, the genesis of the Poet Laureate was the thing that, because that's what I do, that was one of the things that I was very interested in. I see, as Randy was mentioning, bringing children into this. I think that using art and children in writing, I think there are lots of possibilities there. Don Berger has made a number of suggestions as to what some projects that we might try to follow through on. But I'm definitely interested in trying to find ways in which we can create young writers and make children more involved in writing. I mean, we have a number of projects that are statewide, some of which I have some affiliations with, and I'd just be interested in seeing what we can do to bring children more into this, thing with writing, poets, short stories, fiction, whatever, creating some kind of written word.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's, I'm very satisfied with the direction that things are going right now. I mean, I think the projects, and a lot of that was just the sweat equity and the work and support with with this council on the cultural planning and engaging. And I think we're headed in a really exciting direction now. So there's a long laundry list of possible programs and projects that can be undertaken, all of which are very interesting, and we've got a lot of active volunteers. So just the ones I mentioned. I mean, I think the Poet Laureate, I love how that's played out. Just programs that just engage the community, whether it's through public art, whether it's just public meetings, actually. The public meetings have been really interesting. Folks have just come out for those. I don't know, so it's all fun. That's why I'm going here for another go-around. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Diana Cohn's the ice cream expert, so we've all learned how to do ice cream catering for meetings there. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to thank you both and all the commission for the outstanding job that you've done so far. I'm glad that you're re-upping to keep going. Two things that I just wanted to mention that I think would be particularly helpful to the council as you proceed. Any feedback that we can get as it relates to use policies for the community center and how that affects the types of things that you can do would be very helpful. And the other thing is, as we get to next year's budget and we're thinking about the money that's allocated, it would be helpful to have some options for the types of things that you anticipate doing, kind of levels of funding, so that if we've got a little extra and can bump it up, we know that there are things that are appropriate that you're ready to do.
Yes, we'll have a list with prices.
For all those extra items, extra dollars in the city budget.
Sure.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for generously sharing your skills and your passion with the city. And Councilmember Berry's not here, but I know that if he were, he would note how happy he is that there's Ward 6 representation on this committee.
I just want to thank you all for the work you do. I remember the interview that you guys were doing when you started this, and you wanted to interview all the council members. And I'm so excited that you took on the broad scope of pretty much everything that's possible. And I was concerned that what we were going to do would be narrow, and I think that you let your imaginations go, and it's been really good for the city. And I know where your daughter gets her creative energy and arts orientation from, and you've done well. Thank you for everything both of you have done.
Thank you.
I want to second all the kind things that my councils have said about the time and the energy and all the good things you've done for us. Thank you very much. Thanks. The next interviews are for the Safe Roadways Committee, Dan Turner and Margaret Warner. Dr. Warner, I understand you're interested in getting on the committee.
Yes.
And so I guess I'd like to start off by asking you, about your interest in the Safe Roadways Committee. We do have the materials that you've given us, but I'd like to ask you about your interest in Safe Roadways, and if you could talk a little bit about how you see yourself contributing to the committee, that would be helpful.
Okay. My name's Margaret Warner, and I've lived in Tacoma Park since 1991. First, I lived on Westmoreland Ave, and then recently we moved to Buffalo Ave in 2001. And I'm interested mainly in pedestrian safety in Tacoma Park, and I think all the discussions about the fast cars moving around in Tacoma Park indicates the level of a problem it's becoming in the city. I think I've noticed a difference since the time I've lived here, and I definitely have. And I've noticed some of the things the Safe Roadway I'm assuming the Safe Roadway Committee has done to help the problem, and I think that's great. I'm an injury epidemiologist by training, and I study non-fatal and fatal injury statistics on the national level for a living, and I hope that I can help out by providing the committee with statistics when they would need them and help them figure out. I have some knowledge on how to conduct a survey. I can find statistics pretty easily to help write grants and just collect data, which is what I do for a living, and I think I could do it in my community as a public service.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Turner, if you could talk a little bit about, what kinds of things that you would like to see the committee maybe do, anything that we can do to help you in general.
I've only been on the committee for 6 months, so.
You've just been over the point at which we could just sort of automatically re-up you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I came in just at the time that we presented the proposal to the council for the recent projects. The one thing I am particularly interested in for the coming year is working with Alana and other folks in the city on the Safe Routes to School program and grant writing process. I'm looking forward to that process and think it's good for the city, good for the schools, and good for the kids.
Okay, good.
And just have a general interest in highway safety and have that in my background, and look forward to continuing to work with the committee.
Questions from any other council members?
I'll just say thank you to Margaret for volunteering. I think it's terrific when people with expertise and interest, like you both have, come forward, and I'd love to see Ward 1 represented. And yeah,
there's no danger that it won't be. Well, thank you both for your interest and your interest in continuing and your interest in joining the committee. I appreciate it. It's one of our more important committees. It's done some good work. I hope it will continue to do that, and I think both of you would contribute to that. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. For the Health Services Impact Committee, Trevor Delafield. I don't see him here. We'll reschedule that one. For the Noise Control Board, Ellen Fabian and Kathleen Quinn.
We also have an additional one for that, Steve Davies, who's here.
Okay.
New applicant.
Okay. Yes, I think we got, yes, and as a matter of
Yes.
fact, I'm picking up the other thing, Steve Davies. Okay. What we generally do is, for people who are asking for reappointment, we talk to them about the kinds of things that the committee is doing. And I understand that you all particularly have some concerns that you'd like to bring to the council. So this, I would certainly encourage you to talk to us about your interests and things that you might do in the future, as well as anything that you'd like to bring to the council, anything that you think that we need to be aware of.
Okay, hi, I'll start, and then Kathleen can jump in.
Okay.
Kathleen's been on the committee actually longer, since its origin. So, yeah, so she can probably really speak up for it. Unfortunately, Bowden isn't here, so, which would have been very helpful, but I understand she'll be here next week, so,
Yeah.
or the next time we meet, so that'll be a good thing. And I guess I'll start. I think that the committee, at the beginning, there was quite a bit of work that was done in terms of framing the bylaws and establishing the two-party complaint procedure, and really, I think, and I can say this because I wasn't on the committee at that point, but I think that they did quite a bit of work on pulling all of that together, and and for a new committee, I think that is a lot of work. I guess that just to share with you, and I'll be really honest and direct, just to share some of the comments that I've gotten from Kathleen and Bowden and the other Kathleen as well, is at this point, people work hard and we show up for meetings, and at this point, we're feeling a little bit like we're not sure that we have a real charge from the council as to specifically the purview, the kinds of activities, now that the bylaws are done, and now that the two-party complaint has been established, and now that people like Rudy Rice are, in place, really doing some fantastic intervention and proactive work on behalf of mitigating noise problems in the community. We've just been feeling, there's been a sense that we're not attached enough to either a particular council member's agenda or portfolio so that we can get a sense of where do we go from here. And whether it's in terms of holding public meetings about, citizens' issues and complaints still around noise issues, whether it's more frequent contact with the police. As kind of volunteers, it's a little bit difficult. Jesse's really helpful to us, but as volunteers, it's a little difficult for us to set that in motion without, I guess the sense is, without first having, a charge or just having that, even a connection, I guess is what we were talking about, to a council member's portfolio, so we know this is the person that we can go to in case, for following up or to, just begin, at this point to start knowing where would you like the committee to go and what can we do next. So now I'll stop so Kathleen can kind of say some things too.
I'm Kathleen Quinn, and I live in Ward 2, and I came onto the Noise Control Board due to dogs barking on my street. I know our board and our committee is not the sexiest one here in Tacoma Park, but I think with, the city is growing, it's getting more dense, people are bringing in more vehicles, more dogs, and the helicopters and other issues that affect my neighborhood in Ward 2. I really think, I would love to see us to be able to go out onto other websites and community, let people know that we exist, that they do have power, that they can enjoy their homes if they need to, that there is a place to go, because I know a lot of people don't like to confront their neighbors directly, so we can kind of be a midpoint for those people. But I think a lot of people feel helpless, and they don't really know that we exist, and I think we can be a face for other people when they're afraid to approach their neighbors.
Okay. I think those are certainly good issues. It seems to me that many of the things that you're mentioning fall within your current purview. But what I'm hearing from you is that you would like to have a more detailed discussion with the council about specifically how to make some of these things happen, and rather than you're sort of going out and trying to make them work yourselves. I think I would certainly be happy to do that, to schedule something like that. Let me ask you a follow-up question, though, about about noise complaint cases that you've gotten. Have you actually had two-party noise complaints? So you actually haven't had any two-party noise complaints come to you?
We've had the complaints, but they never really...
They never go to hearing. Yeah.
They were resolved before they got to the board?
Because of the good work that Rudy does, and I think the city mediation team. So it's all good stuff, it's all intervention, but no, we haven't. I don't know the latest. Jesse had just sent us something about the church over there, so I'm not sure if that, but I understand that that's going to first go to mediation, so probably it won't come to us for a hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, and since, they've appointed, a noise officer, an adjudication officer, Rudy Rice, that's helped. Because before, I don't think the police knew what to do. They had other issues more important than,
It sounds to me like what we ought to do is follow up, is we ought to schedule a council discussion specifically of the scope of responsibility of the committee, and you can give us your thoughts, and we can take a look at the scope as it was originally laid out in the law and see if what we can work out in terms of if there's changes that need to be made to that, or whether there's some things that you would like to do that need to be facilitated. If the rest of the council is okay with that, I think that's what we'll do is follow up. But the question I would have, is there any particular, and I want to get to you, Mr. Davies, too. Is there any particular questions or concerns that the council has that you want to address to the folks who are current noise control board people? Go ahead.
Thank you. I thank you for offering to re-up on the committee, even with a cloudy future of not knowing what you might be doing. But I'd be curious what each of you two think you should be doing in the next year, or the committee should be doing. The board.
Eventually, I would love to see this committee dissolve because people are aware of it and they know what they can do. That's just my opinion. I think this was a good start. People had some concerns and issues, but But I think if we had more, if there was awareness out there, there would be no need for us. Because we do have, a nuisance abatement officer now, full-time. So I think we just need more visibility to get the word out. Like, because I had neighbors approach me that were helpless. What do I do? I have kids trying to sleep and they can't sleep because, the barking. And, so at least people on my street know, they can come to me and then I can move on from there. But I'd like it for them to be able to take the step and not feel intimidated.
So you're actually seeing maybe a winding down of the need for the board itself.
I would think in a couple of years maybe, but I don't know, because as the noises are changing, like before helicopters weren't an issue, now they're a daily factor. So I'm not sure. I mean, I would like to see that, but I mean, I'd be willing to stay on as long as it takes. I would hope eventually that...
It may well be that Rudy is so, has really kind of made himself so visible in the community and within the police that perhaps there is no need for us. It's really, but I think I echo Kathleen. I think one thing that we'd really like to talk to the council about is the whole visibility issue. And there was that good article in the, I think Jesse wrote it, that was, I guess it was last winter, about the Noise Control Board and what people could do. And I think Kathleen's right, the issues that we do hear, and we just hear it anecdotally, to us from neighbors, is that people are very intimidated about noise issues. So I think that kind of the way that the community can deal with that is through sort of visibility. Maybe that's the police department's, Rudy's role in public education, and sort of, taking down the anxiety for making that complaint, and, the way that he handles it is so non-intrusive and so so promoting, good neighbors instead of adversarial. So, but that would be a great issue, for example, for us to talk with the council, like how could we promote visibility? How can we raise our, is it through public hearings? What are the steps? And probably people have some really good ideas that we might not have that we'd be happy to consider, as for the next year's work.
So it sounds like there is still work to do.
Yeah, I think so. Until we feel that people really do know us and know to come to us, or know to at least, that there is a place to help them through some of the intimidation or noise issues.
Thank you.
Any other questions by the council members? I realize that this has sort of put you in kind of an awkward position, Mr. Davis.
Hey, I've already worked myself out of a job.
What I think I would invite you to do at this point is, I very much welcome your interest in participating in the committee, and I guess what I would invite you to do is be part of our follow-up discussion on perhaps what the Noise Control Board could do in the future. And then, maybe we would ask you to come and speak to us whether this is something that you continue to be interested in. But I would also just invite you at this point, if there's anything you would like to talk to us about, relative to the Noise Control Board and your interest in it, I would welcome you to do that also.
I would only say that I am interested in this because of, well, actually, when Kathleen mentioned dogs, I remembered that I had some dogs barking a lot in my neighborhood, and I called the police a few times about that. But more recently, leaf blowers, which I really don't really see the need for them, but I know that some people like to have these machines and use them. They're very loud, they're annoying, they're whining. They're not very efficient. They cause noise pollution, air pollution. They blow particulates and dust around. And that's kind of where I got interested in this most recently. Is, to me, what I see is the proliferation of just lawn care services, and which I myself, hired some guys for a while, and this year I decided I should probably get off my butt and try to do my own lawn. But it's just growing in this community, and people out there, and it's noisy, it's annoying. That's really where I'm coming from, and I work at home. I'm self-employed, so and I think there are probably a growing number of people here in Tacoma Park who do work out of their homes. Probably a higher percentage of people here in this city who do so, and that's when these folks come. And to me, it's a noise issue. It's a noise pollution. It's an air pollution issue. I sent an email to the council and you, Mayor Porter, about trying to prohibit the use, perhaps phasing out the use of gas-powered leaf blowers. In this day and age, I don't see why we're using those. At the very least, I don't see why the city should be using those. And I know that there's a rule or a recommendation that you shouldn't use them on certain code red days, but does anybody really know that? I mean, do they know what a code red day is? Is anybody actually going to enforce that? Code red days may be every day in the future, so do we want to wait until Congress requires catalytic converters for leaf blowers? It seems absurd and insane to me, but anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like you've suggested some ideas that could be part of a discussion about public education and public information. And what I would like to do is I would like to go ahead and schedule it. Probably will have to be September because we've got 2 more meetings in the month of July, and we're pretty full agendas, and then we usually don't have meetings in August. And so I think we would have to pick this back up in September. But I would like to, if I could, Mr. Davies, include you in some of these discussions, and then we'll just go ahead and then address, after we've had this discussion, we'll go ahead and address the issue of the Noise Control Board and the appointments to the Noise Control Board. So thank you very much for bringing this to us this evening, and I appreciate it. And I think these are excellent thoughts, and we definitely need to have a follow-up discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We can now move, and I think, I'm saying this to the council, I think we can do this fairly quickly because we've had discussions about both of these topics. I think we can move to our 2 regular meeting items and then take a very quick break before we get to the work session items. First regular meeting item is the ordinance regarding the memorandum of understanding with Montgomery County about the illicit discharge.
Kathy, before you start, I'm going to go. I feel pretty terrible.
Okay.
And so I'm just going to go and be sick someplace other than in public.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Yes.
We had this work session discussion last week. I believe everyone's familiar with the issue. The proposal before you is to authorize the city manager to sign an MOU between the city and the county, giving the county the enforcement authority for illicit discharge that occur within the city limits of Tacoma Park. Currently, that authority resides within the state, and we have found that the response time is not within residents' expectations and a little slower than was originally anticipated when the decision was made in 2003 and 2004 to use the state as the enforcement authority for discharges within the city, within Sligo Creek, or any tributaries to Sligo Creek. So this would just continue that process we discussed last week that will allow the county to have direct response. Once notified by us or any resident of an illicit discharge, the county would come out to do the initial investigation, testing, identifying the source, and then would determine whether or not any enforcement action was appropriate and would take place thereafter.
Okay. Are there any questions? We did discuss this last week. Are there any questions, Colleen?
The only question I have is, did we, is this the kind of thing that we would talk to the Committee on the Environment about and involve them in the process or make them aware of it, participate in it? in any way?
They're generally, we're aware of the process in times that I've spoken to them about it, and they certainly were aware of the specific situation with Columbia Union College that generated the concern that was raised by friends of Sligo Creek and Marty Ittner in the past. So they're aware of that. This is actually sort of an administrative matter. We're required by law to have an enforcement authority. If it's not within our own city government, then we're required by law through the Clean Water Act and the stormwater management measures to identify an enforcement body. The city had made the decision in previous years to use the state in that role, and has since reevaluated that decision and come to the conclusion that it was much more in the city's interest to use the county. At this point, I don't think you would find anyone arguing with that point of view. It's a difference of 9 to 12 months to get a matter before the Attorney General's office and determine whether or not enforcement action would take place versus 3 months, which would be the county's timeline. Again, the county is also a little more indicated it's a little more willing to take enforcement action versus when you're sitting in a queue on the state's Attorney General's desk. It requires a fairly substantial violation in order to generate the kind of legal action that it would require.
Any other questions? Would someone like to move the ordinance?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is any council comments on the ordinance? Any council comments on the ordinance? Any public comments on the ordinance?
I just wanted to add that one of the issues that came up last week was whether or not the city could be a party to any negotiated settlement between Columbia Union College and the state. We're still looking into that. I have had conversations with Linda Perlman about that. There is no legal standing that the city would have and no legal basis for us to be involved in those discussions, but we will pursue it with the I was going to say case manager, wrong term, but whoever the appropriate person is within the Attorney General's office in that case number and find out whether or not they would allow us to be party to that. But we do not have any standing. We do not have any legal rights to be there.
Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. If there is no council discussion, this is the first reading of the ordinance. All of those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ordinance passes at first reading. Second reading is scheduled for next week. The second item on our regular meeting agenda is a reading of an ordinance, first reading of an ordinance, exempting certain properties from rent stabilization. This follows on the work session discussion that the council had last week. And as I looked at the proposed ordinance, it seemed like it's fairly straightforward and covered what we had talked about. Is there anything else you'd like to present to us?
I'll just give you a brief rundown of what we tried to do since the last council meeting. We did a little bit of renumbering. The first section now just explains what the scope of rent control is in the city and then describes what the rent stabilization allowance is, which is kind of the primary tool of rent stabilization. Then the next section, 620.021, lists residential facilities where rent control does not apply. There's no need to apply for an exemption in these facilities. It just simply doesn't apply. The next section, 620.022, is the rental units and rental facilities that are eligible for an exemption, but the owners must apply and be granted the exemption. And these were the facilities that were primarily discussed by the council last week. The first subsection, A1, applies only to individual units, and they're units that have tenants that are participating in Section 8 type programs where they pay a fixed amount towards rent, and then the government entity makes up the remainder of the rent, regardless of how high the rent is. Subsection A2 covers facilities that contain one or more rental units that are reserved for low and moderate income tenants that are subject to agreements with government entities that control the rents for those units. Subsection A3 is the newly constructed rental facilities. It now specifically states it applies for only 5 years and that it's not applicable to properties where the new units replaced existing rental units. And then we talk about the termination of these different exemptions. The Section 8 exemptions have to be renewed every year because tenants come and go from these units. For the facilities that are subject to rent control agreements, the exemption lasts as long as the agreement lasts. Then the last significant point is the rents upon termination. And for the new units, it's simply the last rent charged before the expiration of the exemption. And then for the other exempt units, it's the maximum allowable rent at the commencement of the exemption plus the annual allowances that accrue during the interim.
Okay. Any council members have questions? Eileen and then Bruce.
On number 4, where you use the term federal rent subsidy, and then use an example of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, I asked one of the other council members who has gone home sick if it was his impression that you intended to include in those low-income housing tax credit properties or other properties where the rent is restricted. And the reason is because you're using a really specific term, or a term that could be specific, rent subsidy. And there are a lot of ways that the federal government or probably other programs provide a subsidy. It may be to the building through upfront money or insurance, or the other ways where they are subsidized where it's not a rent subsidy for the individual unit. Do you follow me?
Yeah. Which paragraph are you referring to?
She's on the cover sheet.
The cover sheet, number 4.
Oh, okay.
So you've used the term federal rent subsidy and then picked an example where it is specifically a federal rent subsidy. And if you're intending to include in that all of the varieties of subsidy in addition to specifically rent subsidy, maybe you could use a term like rent restricted, or like you did in the one for number 3 above, where it says that controls the rent level. So it would read something like units leased to tenants assisted under county, state, or federal subsidy programs that control rent levels.
But let me just ask, does the language on section 6.20.022A1, does that take care of your concern? That's the actual legal language. Does that handle it?
Well, it says rent subsidy program. So some of the programs aren't rent subsidies. They might get some kind of a discounted loan, and in exchange then, or they get low-income housing tax credits, and in exchange the rent is controlled, but there's not a subsidy to the rent. Do you see
Right.
what I'm saying about the language?
What we hope, if you turn to page 3 of the ordinance itself,
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
under the section the mayor was referencing,
The section what?
A1.
Right, that's what I'm looking at.
A1 is, the intent there is to exempt individual units where the tenant is receiving the direct rental subsidy, if you will. What you're talking about, our thought is that that would be covered under A2, where it's more of a broader operating subsidy or mortgage or tax credit program that impacts the entire building, and not a specific tenant that, or the subsidy or the operating or the tax credits would come and go if John Doe lived there 1 year and he moved out, and then they'd have to reapply for that subsidy or that operating income when Jane Smith came in. It's more of a building focus on the second
Right.
A2 than it is in A1, which is very unit-specific, very individual-specific.
And this applies to everyone, whether they're a nonprofit or not, this section, right?
The way it's phrased.
Okay.
Our thought is that most governmental most programs that are offered that fall within those parameters as far as establishing rent limits and limits as far as the income for the tenants occupying those facilities are generally nonprofits. It's not always true, but the intent is that the building rents are affordable to individuals of a specific income level.
Right. Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay. Are there any other questions for us?
If you can just clarify for me on page 2, section 620.021, about inapplicability. I'm having a little trouble with the language in A, because I'm not sure which subsection B it refers to. Is it referring to subsection B in that same section?
Can you say that over again, sir?
6.20.021A.
Right, okay.
Except as provided in subsection B, the provisions of Chapter 620 rent stabilization shall not be applicable to the following. So it's already a little hard because I'm kind of getting into a double negative there, but which subsection B? Where are the exceptions?
The exception is that the very next paragraph B. That's the one provision of rent control that does apply to these units, and that's the.
And basically what it is saying is that for accessory apartments and units where the property owner owns just a single unit, it doesn't matter how much they raise their rent, they're not subject to rent stabilization from that perspective, but they can only raise the rent once a year. And that's the requirement of the ordinance now. So you could raise it, for example, 10% every year, but you could only do it once a year.
What it basically means is that being quote-unquote exempt from rent stabilization doesn't exempt you from the requirement.
From that
You can only do
requirement,
rent
that
once a
basically,
year.
that's the one
Right.
condition of rent stabilization.
You're not
would
exempt
apply.
from that.
Oh, the one thing we'd
Exempt
like.
from everything else.
That's clear with that explanation. I'm not sure it's clear with just the language for anybody reading it.
Maybe I'm turning into a lawyer, but I understood it.
The one thing we'd like to clarify with that is that it should actually be 8.3 and 8.4 rather than 8.2 and 8.3. It's an error that will be corrected in the second reading.
Bruce, maybe what would be more clear is if subsection B read the foregoing, or the rental units or residential facilities described in subsection A above, for those rental facilities, they may only be increased once within a 12-month period. So we can eliminate talking about an exception above.
I didn't hear everything you said, but that made sense.
I'm hoping it made sense.
Except, so you're saying under A, you would delete except as provided in subsection B?
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you would say.
But I didn't hear what you said. B
I
would.
was, sorry, I'm kind of thinking out loud here. If I can write it down, and I will.
Yeah.
If you can do something for second reading,
Yeah,
that would be
but
helpful.
another way to look at it, Ken, and I'm not sure that this would be any more clear or less clear, you could reverse A and B and say B, and say what's now B. For any rental unit, rents may not be raised more than once during a 12-month period, and then B, except for that provision, the rest of it shall not apply to these entities.
And anything that would help what seemed to me like double negatives and circular references.
But that's legal language.
Yeah,
I'm looking for clarity.
The only thing that I would hesitate to make that change about is to have the first section of with the title rent stabilization inapplicable be about something that applies to all of them. So I don't know if you make it its own section to say that, rents can only be raised once in a 12-month period.
But I think that's a good point.
So why don't we let Ken fiddle with that? And are there any other questions, Terry?
I would just like to append a comment to that discussion, and that is that I think that one of our goals for recodification was to put things in plain English and easy to read and make them clear. And I think we have room for improvement here.
Okay. Does someone want to move the ordinance?
I'll move it.
At first reading? All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is anyone else, any other council comments? I think we have talked about this a fair amount. Are there any public comments on this ordinance at first reading?
Yes, my name is Mark Castle. I'm an attorney. As you all know, I represent a lot of landlords. I've also spent several years working full-time drafting legislation for local governments. There are a couple of small errors in here I'll just talk to staff about, but a couple of larger issues I wanted to bring to your attention. In A4, 620.021, A4, you're exempting landlords that own only one rental unit in the city. This means that if I have 100 units outside the city and only one inside the city, the unit's not subject to rent control.
Right.
But if I'm in the city and I have a house with an accessory apartment, and for whatever reason I move out of the house and rent them both out, they're both subject to rent control. And I'm thinking, is this really the public policy the city wants? Doesn't really seem terribly consistent to me. Another point is in .022, you've got a section that talks about payment standards and maximum monthly rental assistance potentially available to an assisted household. I think how much rent can be paid may depend on the program that HOC is administering. I don't know an awful lot about the details of the various programs, but I know there are several programs, and there may be several maximums depending on which program you're looking at. A practical problem, if I'm a landlord and a person comes to me and they have what used to be called Section 8 is now Housing Choice Voucher, how long is it going to take me to get my exemption approved for that tenant in that unit? Can the tenant wait that long? You're really going to need a very quick process for that. In A2 of .022, I think you're really opening up a can of worms here. I think what you've got is a situation where if I'm working with the governmental program as a landlord, I can charge higher rents to a low-income tenant than a for-profit landlord can. And I would suggest to you, this actually came up last week and I discussed it with some people, why not saddle or harness the power of for-profit landlords? If they can do the same thing a nonprofit landlord can do, why not let them do the same thing a nonprofit landlord can do? A lot of details need to be worked out there, perhaps. I know there's a real suspicion of for-profit landlords among some of the council, but this is an opportunity you've got out there. And on the exemption for the first 5 years on new construction, I don't know how much space there is in Tacoma Park for new residential rental construction. But if I have a building and it gets torn down, fire or any other reason, and I rebuild, I'm not exempt from rent control. And the first question I have is, how in the world are you going to come up with a base rent for a new 2-bedroom unit when the building that was torn down was all 1-bedrooms? You've got a real conceptual gap here in saying that they're not exempt, and that they've got to continue with whatever levels they had before, or annual increases based on that. I think you need to do some more work on this, and I think rather than rushing it through, you ought to talk about some of these issues and how you're going to try to make it all consistent. Thank you.
Are there any other comments?
Yes. My name is Paul Gentile, and I've been a property owner in Tacoma Park since 1978. I met with Mayor Porter. I am the embodiment of what the good lawyer here has said. I provide low-income rental units in a rooming house in Tacoma Park, and they ranged from $350 to $550. Because of utility costs, I was one of the people who paid all the utility costs before then. And because of the increase in utility costs, I tried to put those costs on the tenants after 18 years of not paying, and was told I couldn't do that and had to pay back the rents, and it cost me $7,000. These priorities trouble me. This housing ordinance, the Section 8 housing in Montgomery County now, one bedrooms rent for $1,080 and two bedrooms rent for $1,225. This is 80 or 90% above what my highest cost would be. So this seems to me to be selective enforcement. You're letting the county go through the red light, but for profit you're making them stop at the red light. The council's inclination to accept the newbies, which is the county's low income, and to retain the Elrich exemption while ignoring the plight of those who have already invested a great deal of time and money into their properties is telling. The arrogance and lack of regard towards for-profit landlords concern me, and I feel at best it's an unbalanced housing policy. We've been here for many years. I dedicate on average about 30 weekends a year repairing and making repairs to my houses. Well, what I resent most here is how the council and the laws and the rent stabilization makes me feel like I've cheated someone. And I don't believe I've done that. And that I resent wholeheartedly. I've acted in the best interest of my tenants, and many times to my detriment. I hope the council would come up with some reasonable solution to our problems. What I observe up to now, it's not going to make any significant changes for quote-unquote for-profit. And I went over the numbers with Her Honor here, and I haven't made a dime since I've owned the property for the 18 years. But I don't see how, and we have Mr. Hessel here representing probably the larger landlords. I'm just a very small landlord, but you've boxed everyone into a corner. And I think that's wrong. You say you're not against landlords, but you are against landlords, and then you're also against gentrification. That's just what you're going to do if you keep forcing landlords to exist under the way the present rules are. It also appears that the council has a disdain for people making a living in the housing industry. I have filed my hardship position, and as I said, the city is fully aware of my situation. The city is preventing me from any profit, let alone a reasonable profit, on the current scheme. The present hardship and capital improvement petition route is fraught with the lack of guidelines and has delivered arbitrary and capricious decisions. And others that I know about have been down that road with lackluster results. And I filed the petition, and I want to thank the Assistant City Manager for having my calls addressed. I've had to call 3 times. My calls were never returned. Not until I called the Assistant City Manager, boy, I got a call 5 minutes later. And I think the whole culture and the way you treat landlords has to change, really has to change. and you do that by policy. And what I've seen over the last month or two is that everyone is trying to look for some middle ground, but never quite articulating. Councilmember Austin Lane was trying to make some hard and fast rules, but I didn't see anybody taking the lead on this. Right now, I've lived in Tacoma Park for 10 years, and I've fiercely defended Tacoma Park and its detractors when people call it the Republic of Tacoma Park. You know, I think they don't know what they're talking about. Right now, I don't think I can continue to make those defenses in light of the laws and the policies that frankly don't make any workable sense. I'm asking the council to direct staff to produce policies that provide regulatory relief for landlords and bring them to the council's attention by the end of the month. Otherwise, the city's going to be in court litigating policies it can't defend.
Thank you, and I do appreciate you came in to talk to me and show me some of the concerns that you had. And as I believe I told you at the time, I thought that many of your most immediate problems, not going back over a number of years, but some of your immediate problems were the kinds of things that we are going to try and address with the increased utility allowances.
And I received the survey and appreciate that and filled it out dutifully and sent it back. But again, nothing's going to happen. And I'm also suspicious about how the data is going to be used. You've asked for data from July. Well, the increases are going to take place over the next 3 years. If for example, the policy that's in force in effect now, those landlords that did not, that paid their utility bills out of their own pocket, and I did that for 18 years and continue to do so, have to take their utility bills and then take it off the rent that's already very low. And it's a zero-sum game, and nothing really happens regarding that. I'm very suspicious about you taking that data and what you do with that data. You take that data and say, well, look, it's only this here in July, and then there's the letter that came out from the public utilities that said, hey, this is going to be spread out, and the state action that is going to be spread out even more.
Yeah, no, we do understand that utility costs are scheduled to go up in the future, and that's why we do have a concern about it. And I do think that the kind of thing that we're...
But need the immediate relief now, not in January.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
All right. So, and this is part and parcel of this, and we feel we're being totally ignored.
I understand what you're saying. Sure.
Well, but you're ignoring us nonetheless.
Anyone else? In terms of Mr. Hessel's comments, I forget what they all were, but I do want to say that actually I agree with you on the issue of exempting a landlord who has 100 units but only one within the city of Tacoma Park. And I did talk to the staff about whether we could do something about that, and it turns out that it's a real difficulty for us to pin down the number of units outside of Tacoma Park that a property owner owns. Otherwise, I would be happy to figure out a way to do that if I thought we could. My reading of Section 220.022A2 is that it could be either a nonprofit or for-profit who could take advantage of that section. The only requirement would be that there has to be some kind of an agreement with a government agency. In other words, you can't just say, oh, I'm doing this, and so you get exempted. It would have there has to be some kind of an agreement on the books. But I think that agreement, you know, so far there have been agreements with nonprofits, but if you'd like to give us a model for an agreement with a for-profit to come under the same regulatory control, you know, I wouldn't object to our applying the same exemption to it. And I don't remember what all of your comments were. I understand you were talking about in different subsidy programs, there are different payment limits. I understand that, and I think what we were trying to do was just to talk about we would exempt it as long as the rent was not above the payment limit, whatever it might be. We're simply trying to allow in other words, to allow the subsidy not to be used by the property owner, but to actually reduce the rent by that amount. I'm probably not saying it as gracefully as I could, but I do understand what the intent is. Is there anything else anyone else would like to respond?
Thank you, Mayor Porter. Again, as I mentioned when we discussed this, or when this was discussed at earlier council meetings, because this ordinance could affect me, I have to recuse myself from this vote.
Actually, I think as it's written now, it doesn't, does it? Because you're currently exempt, and you think you would be exempt, wouldn't you? I mean, I shouldn't bring that up because that's irrelevant to this, but... But anyway, I take what you're saying, that you wish to be, for the principle of it to be exempted, you wish to recuse yourself from the discussion. Thank you for that. Is there any other comments? Any other public comments? All right. We will move on to the first reading of the ordinance. Since this is the first reading, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And there's one abstention. All right. The council is going to take a short break, and we will come back for the remainder of our work session items. We have a series of work session items, starting with the discussion of the residential permit parking. I don't know if you've had a chance to sort of talk to people. I think you've had a chance to talk to people about this. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I actually sat at the SOSCA meeting at which this was discussed, and the thing that came across to me very clearly was that the people who were interested in the permit parking were very concerned about having it 7 days a week.
Yes.
And that is going to have to be a separate discussion. But I would strongly recommend that we take that up and talk to, have a session where we talk to the police department about that. Because it's not at all clear to me why we shouldn't do that. I don't know if anyone else has a thought.
If I can just recall, I think correctly, the reason why our current regulations are what they are, there were some distinct hours for various parking regulations in different areas of the city, and the police came to us a number of years ago and said it would be much easier to enforce if they're all the same, and so we kind of squeezed down the categories and tried to make them fairly universal so it was easier on them. But it would seem to me that going to 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, if we already have a category for 24 hours a day, Monday to Friday, isn't that much of a stretch for a change. So I don't particularly see a reason why we couldn't go that way.
Okay. I think we need to have a discussion with the police department, though, in order to make sure that we understand what the issue is. Yeah.
In my ward, there were areas where permit parking was discussed, and there were petitions, and people agreed to something, and it was established in a certain way. And then the council had the discussion about developing a standard, and then that got imposed back on the people who had discussed it, but had decided on their kind of their limits. So knowing that there are still people who remember that and resent it, I think we probably should have that discussion with the police department and be respectful to community, different neighborhoods having different needs.
I understand what you're saying, Joy, and I appreciate that point. My recollection is that when we had differences from area to area, they were more like an hour difference in terms of the time frame, like 7 a.m. versus 8 a.m.
Right.
And the police were telling us that that was impossible for them to keep straight. And what I was thinking of in terms of this was not to change the standards or to eliminate standards, but to add another standard, which should in fact be the easiest one to remember of all, which is the 24/7 standard. And that would just be added to the number, to the, I think, 3 we have at this point. I think that should respond both to what this neighborhood wants and to the police department's concern about uniformity. But let's not get into that discussion too much. But I will go ahead and schedule another time, although it won't be before the end of this month, to talk about changing the thing. If I might just put something on the table, Colleen, before I get to you. Does the council also want to talk at the same time about the issue of splitting blocks? Again, I think that the police department might have a strong feeling about this, but should we even put that item on the table? And maybe I can address that to you, Colleen.
Well, the block that they're talking about is kind of interesting. It's all numbered, I think, in the 6700 series, but there's a T that comes into it. I mean, if you asked me if those were 2 separate blocks, I would say yes. So I guess we're defining a block as a number series. Is that right?
Is that the way it's defined?
Yes.
Okay. Then maybe that might be easier to change than we thought.
Yeah, it's just a different definition of what a block is, so that it's any area in between 2 intersecting streets. I mean, to me, that's a block.
If I might add, we already have that condition.
What condition?
In this case, I'll call it split block, where the numbers are continuous, yet there's a T intersection with an intersecting street. We have stopped a permit parking area at that intersecting street, and that's the unit block of Pine.
Of which one?
Pine.
Fine.
There's something odd also on Boston. I can't remember what it is, but I think it's that there are, it looks like one block, but it goes from, I don't know.
And if I recall correctly, the agreed upon end of that parking permit area in the unit block of Pine was the telephone pole just past the end of Montgomery.
That definitely makes it hard for the police to enforce.
But
Yeah.
we have that already.
But now that you mention that, I remember that, and I also believe that that's one of the concerns that the police department had about the proliferation of configurations that led to the uniform law, which I think then makes that not happen. So, but I'd have to go back and look at the law, I don't remember. But I do remember that discussion now, and I remember what you're saying, and I do think that that's why we have that. But we can certainly discuss it again. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Could we add to that discussion some other more targeted practice? And the one I have in mind is a ban on commercial vehicles overnight. And I mean, you might do that a number of different ways. You might, specific vehicles like taxis appear to be the issue, but you could do it for commercial vehicles that aren't registered to someone who lives in the city of Tacoma Park. So, for example, if you were a contractor and you lived in the city of Tacoma Park and you parked your car in front of your residence, that would be one thing. But if your car wasn't registered to your residence, then you might be able to not allow parking. Just as a discussion issue, I don't want to have a discussion right now.
Go ahead.
But unless it's changed, and it may have as a result of recodification, or a change in regulations, we currently have that law that bans parking of commercial vehicles on the street overnight. A commercial truck, something, I know that, and I know this because I got a ticket. And this was before I had a truck with any lettering on it. This was somebody, before I was on the council, and it was somebody else's commercial truck, and I usually parked it in the driveway, but one night I parked it on the street, and I got a ticket. And I was not a happy camper.
Well, let's put that into the discussion.
Great.
Could we add one other thing that has been pending with the city manager for a while, and that is on Tacoma Avenue, there are 7 or 8 parking spaces across from Jecky Park. They should have been metered, but apparently the council has to take action for that to happen.
And if I can just add one other little complicating factor to the discussion on commercial vehicles or taxis or whatever parking, also remember that our current law exempt for permit parking areas exempts
Commercial
vehicles
with their commercial name on them.
Yes. So there's different.
We would have to wend our way through that minefield.
Yes.
Okay.
I want to add one more thing, and this is not about the discussion, but is in relation to this, and that is would it be possible for us to, at this point, ask the city attorney, given that I've been banging my head against a brick wall, if there is some kind of a public nuisance that you could do? Is there a state law that because Belford Towers is arguably a public nuisance in that area. So is there
I'm not sure we can declare an apartment building as public nuisance.
Well, they're creating a public nuisance with the urination and the trash. I mean, that would be the definition, I would think, of a public nuisance that they're creating. I just wonder if we could ask for some advice from the city attorney.
We can certainly, you mean to do something about people who are...
Just to ask, no, specifically about Belford Towers, because they refuse to cope with the issue, and it's their policies that create it. I'm just wondering if we could ask for some advice on that.
I'm not sure how we would We can certainly talk to the city attorney. My guess would be that Belford Towers would not be considered responsible for the illegal conduct of its residents. I mean, I don't think a housing facility is responsible for the conduct of its residents off the premises.
But their parking policies could be creating some technical term for its Cone Park residents, and our city attorney could look at it.
I think we should go after the actions themselves. I think we should ask for people to keep an eye on that area and go after people who are doing things illegally, because I think that sort of thing should be kept out of the way, regardless of whether it's being created by an apartment building or, you know, that happens to be near a bus stop, which is a problem in Ward 6 or something like that.
Okay, but my thinking is in the same way a bartender might be sued because they provide alcohol to somebody. It's something about the characteristic of how they're doing business, and then that person goes out and of their own action does something. There's a relationship between the behavior of the business and the resulting impact. And I would just like to know what the Maryland law is on
We
it.
can certainly ask the city attorney for that. I don't think that's a parallel, but I don't have an objection to asking the city attorney. For the short term, how does the council want to handle this? Do we want to move forward with the permit parking for these areas under the current rules, and then if we should modify the rules in the future, deal with that modification, or does the council want to hold off on this until we've had a chance to examine the rules? My recommendation would be the first.
I agree.
Okay. Because I think we can move forward with the permit parking issue as early as next week if we want to. I've got it temporarily set on the agenda, but I don't think we can deal with these other things, which will require council work session and then two reading, at least one work session and two reading ordinance. I don't think we can do that before the fall. Okay. So that is the sense to move forward with that. The traffic calming petitions for Conway and for Woodland. Did you have anything you wanted to say about those? Or did you have anything you wanted to say about that, or Colleen, did you have anything you wanted to say about that either?
If you would like
I
to
think
first, there's a couple of things I wanted to say.
Well, I feel comfortable with my conversations with the people in the area and with the Public Works Director about the kind of traffic calming that we're talking about, and I think there's some consensus in the neighborhood, and that it addresses some of the current concerns of the folks here who were concerned about, you know, bicycle access and impact on people who are disabled and impact on the speed of emergency vehicles while still having a slowing effect in the neighborhood.
Do you have anything you'd like to say as follow-up?
Well, just quickly, I realize that the hour is getting late, but the city code specifies that we can't have traffic control devices 200 feet from a stop sign, and there should be 300 to 500 feet between traffic control devices. That being said, we have a lot of situations in the city prior to when those definitions were added in 2003 that violate the city's code. There are limitations in new applications that make it a challenge to meet those definitions within the city code. So it may be something the council wants to see and address in the future as we look at traffic control in general. It doesn't reference intersections, and in both these cases we have situations with intersections, and the nearness or closeness to an intersection is a concern for my office and the city engineer. That being said, there's three types of devices we currently can offer. Usually what we've been putting in are speed bumps that we call speed bumps. They're the typical city speed bump, 3.5-inch high. It's what we call the city standard. They're 12 feet wide, but they have a defined and very definite lump on top of the rise that gives a rather jarring effect when you're driving. You cannot proceed over these things greater than 5 or 10 miles per hour. There's the speed hump, which is more typically seen in the county. That is also 12 feet wide, but over the expanse, it's a general crest that goes up and down, so you don't have that jarring nature in the middle. They're the type of speed humps that you see on Sligo Creek Parkway and outside the city in various areas where they've been installed. We call that a speed hump. Or a county standard speed hump. And then the last device is a speed table.
which is actually serves multiple functions. Primarily, it's used as a demarcation of a crossing, safe pedestrian passage. It tends to be 10 feet across and then have 6-foot wings on either side that get to that rise, and that 10-foot tabletop is a very flat surface that's supposed to be level as well as being flat. Those devices tend to work best on fairly level streets and surfaces.
And how high, excuse me, Gail?
It's generally 3 inches high. The one we have in Tacoma Avenue is higher than that.
Yeah, well over.
The standards that you have within the traffic engineering manuals themselves call for them to be 3 inches high. Ours on Tacoma Avenue is higher. Now, the two requests that you have in front of you, the one on Conway, I'll just speak to them specifically. Both streets are fairly narrow. On Conway, in particular, you have a street that's on an elevation, an angle going down, and a turn, which is problematic for both traffic control as well as speed bump placement. There's parking on both sides. This is a very tightly parked area. So all the factors that usually should be there to slow traffic down, being narrow passageways, cars on both sides, and a turn, apparently, according to the residents that live there, is not working. Those are generally what you would hope to see to naturally slow traffic down. So I guess that's what's led the residents to requesting the speed humps. They've asked for 2. According to the engineer, if he were to go out to that site, he would have recommended 1, but he is not opposed to installing 2. You can't quite meet the specifications within the city code and install 2 speed bumps in that block. You can't get them 300 to 500 feet apart. There's just not that much room on the street. Since the code itself references distance from a stop sign and not distance from an intersection, if we were to put the one close to the intersection with Belford, which is what the residents are asking for, you still have a very hard time getting the 300 feet before you get the other speed hump. I think those are the only other comments I have on Conway. On Woodland, the residents are on one side of the block, so it tends to have parking on one side, though I think parking is allowed on either side, but since there are no homes on the one side of the street tends not to be parked. So you have a visual impact there of it being a wider space when actually the street's pretty similar in terms of dimension curb to curb. The residents there have asked for a speed control device to be bicycle friendly. In our minds, the county standard speed hump is one that we would offer as the bicycle friendly speed hump. It is ADA accessible, it's a 3-inch rise, it's a gradual rise. Shouldn't have any trouble with emergency vehicles or bicycles or disabled folks getting over that speed hump. Whereas the city standard speed bump is one that it does not meet ADA requirements and is a fairly significant and abrupt traffic control device. They've again asked for 2 there. We have a little bit of difficulty meeting the requirements of the city code in terms of distance, but are able to wedge that in a little bit better on Woodland. You're definitely 200 feet. The one location they've asked for is 200 feet from that intersection of Elm, which would be a necessity, though it doesn't have a speed stop sign. And then the second one is a little not within, closer than the 300 feet before you get to the corner. So again, we're having trouble staying within the guidelines of the city code and placing 2 speed bumps in both those locations. But it is not one that the engineer envisioned as being problematic for having 2 bumps. That being said, I just wanted to speak to the issue of cost. With our current contract, the speed bump is an $800 installation. The county standard speed hump is a $3,000 installation, and the speed table is a $5,000 installation. So it's a significant cost increase as you go from city standard speed bump to the more gradual county standard speed hump.
Why is that?
Well, there's a number of reasons, and again, I can't speak for the contractor, but my sense is that he's more familiar with city standard speed bumps. He's got templates in place. He knows what's to be expected. Because they have a fairly low rise and then the hump in the middle, they use less asphalt material than the other type of construction. The county speed hump, again, it's the same width, but you have a greater amount of asphalt that's used to form the large expanse of rise over the speed hump. And then the speed table itself is much wider. It's 26 feet wide as opposed to 12 feet wide of the other devices. So those are the cost differentials that you have with that. In both of these cases, if we wanted to install two traffic control devices on both Conway and Woodland, you'd be looking at $6,000 per street for those two installations.
Okay.
Comments? Go ahead.
So $3,000, I'm not seeing that much of a difference in the asphalt, and I'm wondering what the county pays to have those installed.
I don't know. I'll have the engineer check out and see what their contract price is.
Yeah, I mean, I could understand that it would go up to $1,100 or $1,200 maybe, but I don't understand $3,000. And I think that's what they want, though, and I think it's going to take us towards the ADA. But I would like to see if either our contractor will at least match the county, if the county has a lower price, or we can find someone that will contract that's accustomed to putting those in, do it for less. A lot of money.
I would agree with that. I think this is a good opportunity for us to sort of try out the more gradual hump and then just see what people's experience with it is, so we can see if it would be a good thing for us to offer as a option in other places. One of the things in terms of the cost, perhaps we can, I appreciate Colleen's proposal that we get a look at who the county uses, but we maybe also can work a deal with this guy in terms of if we put in 3 or 4 of them, how many times does he have to do the template? I mean, he can do one template and do 4 humps. So maybe we give him, some money to do a template, and then each hump is X amount of dollars. So maybe we can work out some deal with him on a sort of a multiple quantities kind of thing. But I think there's a definite advantage to trying it out. And if the folks here are interested in that, that would be a good thing. This would be a good place to do it.
A couple of things. Given the Maple Avenue experience, I wouldn't want you to go through that. On the 7100 block of Maple Avenue, I believe we have a county standard. So it would be, well, I might recommend that residents who want the speed bumps go and see if that satisfies them. The people in the 7100 block for a while were, well, some people were very dissatisfied with the county standard, saying it did nothing, that traffic could fly over them. The other thing on the 7100 block of Maple, I believe, is a speed table.
Well, we have a raised intersection. It's kind of a unique device. Oh, you mean at the beginning? Yeah, it again is a little bit of an anomaly, but there is a speed table there.
Okay.
It's smaller than what normally would be placed as a speed table.
Good, because that also had its problems when people were expecting it to be similar to Tacoma Avenue. When I drive Sligo Creek Parkway, the tables that they have, I find like a good reminder if I am going above 25, and then if not, then you're a law-abiding citizen and it doesn't jar your drive. I wonder if our standard looked at that model, because I liked what one of the people said tonight, which was if you're going the speed limit, it shouldn't be a disruption. And I agree with that. And I think that Sligo Creek Parkway ones really do achieve that purpose.
Well, you'll see them signed differently. The county speed hump is a 20-mile-an-hour speed hump, whereas the city speed bump is a 5-mile-an-hour speed bump. So that's how they're designed. The county speed hump is designed to be, crossed over at 20 miles an hour.
Right, but it's just a very different impact than
Yes.
the Sligo Creek Parkway ones. So I guess that's what I'm suggesting, is that our engineer might want to look at that, and then instead of having this county standard and speed table, neither of which has made people happy in my ward, maybe we should have a different design for the speed table idea that could really achieve the goals that people have set out.
I'll have to talk with Park and Planning. It's my understanding that that's the county standard, what they use in Sligo Creek Parkway is the speed, county standard speed hump. That's a 3-inch rise and 12 feet wide. But we'll need to check that and make sure.
In terms of the upper end of Maple, I thought that was our new standard, not the county standard speed hump.
No, we put in a abbreviated speed table there, which isn't 10 feet wide because of the driving.
No, I don't mean at this end of Maple. I mean at the other end of Maple. They're at the
in the 72 and 73.
the ones closest to.
7100 block.
Yeah, I can't remember which way it goes, but the one that's farthest from the city building. There are two more gradual humps.
Yeah.
I thought those were the city standard humps.
No, the best, well, we've just recently put a city standard one on Allegheny. The new one on Allegheny was a city standard. Spruce, we've just replaced them. Park, we've just replaced them minus the one. That's all city standard speed bumps.
Okay.
The ones in the 7100 block of Maple, we had an abbreviated speed table, and we had the county standard speed hump, the 3-inch rise speed hump in the 7100 block.
All right. Well, I would still be happy to have, since people stated that their concern was to slow down traffic somewhat, but still to permit emergency vehicles and bikes, I would be willing to give them what they want, and that sounds like what they want. Any other things? No, I think once the council goes forward, I don't believe the legislation actually specifies what the form is, and we would leave that up to discussion between the city engineer and the residents. So to the extent that we have our preferences, I'm not sure that they're governing on this one. So are we comfortable moving forward with those?
I would still like to see the city engineer take a look at developing a standard that's based on effective ones we've seen in our community and beyond. I'm not sure we've achieved that with the county standard or the speed table.
Okay, but we can go ahead and move forward and with that proviso with the two requested petitions or petitioned streets. Okay. The final item we have on the agenda is a discussion of two items which are fairly closely related, and both of which I think they want comments from the city fairly soon. And that's the DC Comprehensive Plan and the National Capital Planning Commission Regional Plan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Alana Blanchard. I'm a staff person with Housing and Community Development. I just, actually, before we begin, I'd like to point out there's a typo on the letter, and it's on the last page, in the last sentence.
I saw that.
And I have copies, here are revised copies for you, where there's a period that should be an and.
Yes.
This work session item is the proposed capital and federal capital improvement program for the National Capital Region, fiscal years 2007, and there's another typo, 2012, and the District of Columbia Comprehensive Plan. We lump these two together because they...
Yeah, this was a 5-century plan. Okay, kidding.
Because these plans, while they affect the city, are not within our jurisdiction. I'm going to start with the easy one first, which hopefully.
Sure.
The proposed federal capital improvement program for the National Capital Region, fiscal years 2007 through 2012, this is basically a tool that the National Capital Planning Commission, which is a commission that oversees the region, federal budgets and federal activities, where they look at proposed planning projects for the region and provide recommendations. When we reviewed this document, we noticed that there were 3 items that do pertain to the city, and all of which were recommended for future programming. And these items were the boundary markers, maintaining and restoring the boundary markers, of which there are 40 around the District of Columbia and 1 in the city of Tacoma Park. The purple line as part of other rail projects, and also tourist information center and kiosks located throughout the city of Washington, D.C. and the region. And these were all items that we felt were fairly important, and that this is an opportunity to recognize these items as important to the city. The first attachment is a memo where we informed you of this, and the second attachment is a letter basically reiterating that these are important and that the city would like to see them go forward.
Does anybody have an objection to that? I mean, I think that putting an emphasis on all of those things is a good idea. In terms of the Regional Visitor Center and information kiosks, is there any way that we could hook our own sort of ideas of putting information kiosks into that, or is this just the money that they would expend?
I don't think the project has any funding attached to it yet, or that it's a very vague project at the moment and hasn't been completely planned.
Because they talk about supplemental information kiosks and smaller centers at highly visited areas, and we'd like to think of ourselves as one of those throughout the region. I mean, could we make ourselves into one of those smaller centers, and would there be any money attached to it? I think what you're going to say is there's no money attached to any of it, so it wouldn't help us, but...
Currently, there's no money attached to it, and I think if there was, I mean, at least there would be money for installation of information, updating that information. Hopefully that would apply to, at a minimum, the historic area around the metro in both D.C. and in Maryland, but may also point to other areas in the region.
Should we add a sentence into the letter that says the City of Tacoma Park is already considering small information kiosks at places like, you know, our Old Town area? Would that be something that adds to the emphasis of our request?
We could do that.
Does anybody in the council have an objection? Okay, all right. So we're okay with the letter, right? If I don't hear anybody saying no, I'm going to assume the answer is yes. Okay, all right, good.
I just would like to thank Alana. These are things that really the city does need to review and comment on, and I know the comprehensive plan has had multiple meetings throughout the District of Columbia, lots of paperwork to review, and I have not followed it on my own, so I appreciate that you've taken a crack at it.
And Suzanne.
And we're just now getting
Not
to
just
that.
me.
Okay, do you want to
Many
talk to
people.
us about the DC Comprehensive Plan?
Sure. The DC Comprehensive Plan is the first update that the first comprehensive update that has occurred in over 20 years. So it's fairly significant. It expands very much on what the comprehensive plan was. And I believe you have a copy of the excerpt in your attachments, which goes over recommendations and things that the plan recognizes in the adjacent area in the plan, which is the Rock Creek East area element. And this plan is available online if you want to explore other parts of the plan, such as the environmental part, the transportation part.
Is Tacoma Central District part of the Rock Creek East, or is it a separate area?
It's part of that
Okay,
area, and
you.
it's referred to several times. In fact, it's an area of special focus within the Rock Creek East area.
Thank you.
And so, it's a lot of attention is paid to both the economic characteristics of that area and the historic characteristics. And in reviewing the plan, we developed a draft resolution, and the resolution essentially commends the district for the work that they have put into the plan and the very forward or very comprehensive recommendations that they've made. But it also reiterates past resolutions that the City Council has made regarding the area around the metro.
Now, I didn't and I could possibly have missed something, but the only thing I saw specifically on the Tacoma Metro was to enforce the Tacoma Central District Plan redevelopment guidelines. Is that?
Well, they,
I believe it's the 9th whereas, the whereas that begins at the bottom of the first
No, I'm sorry,
page.
I'm not talking about the resolution, I'm talking about in terms of the Tacoma Central, the DC comprehensive plan, the only reference in the DC plan that I saw to the Tacoma Metro was that they recommended enforcing the Tacoma Central District Plan redevelopment guidelines.
Correct.
And implement the recommendations of the Tacoma Transportation Study, which is something that we encourage them to do.
Correct.
So
Exactly.
there isn't anything, as far as I can tell, in their plan that would, how should I say this, that would encourage the plan that's on the table for the metro development, because it is inconsistent currently, as its current iteration is inconsistent with the requirements of the Tacoma Central District Plan. So I think that they are currently not operating according to what's in their own plan. Maybe that's what I should say.
I'm not sure how far along the plan is in terms of the district process,
Okay.
so I couldn't answer that, but we could look into it.
I guess what I would, okay, I think we should have, and I apologize for not going through the resolution in great detail, but I think we should have something that specifically references their action step on the Tacoma Metro Station redevelopment. And we should say something like, we agree with the recommendation that there should be enforcement of the Tacoma Central District Plan redevelopment guidelines for the metro station and implementation of the recommendations of the Tacoma Transportation Study. And I apologize if it's in here and I haven't seen it.
It's not in the now, therefore be it resolved at a minimum, I can tell you that much, so.
Okay.
So.
But on page 8,
Right. I'm suggesting that our resolution specifically cite that and approve of it, because I think that gets us closer to where we want to be.
Yeah, the Village Green aspect as well.
I'm not sure, when they say the Tacoma Central District Village Green, do we know where they're talking about putting that? Is that what they're talking about, the Metro Village Green?
It's only 1 acre, though. And what the people who are opposed to the development have asked is that be
Bigger.
what the whole thing be made of.
Yeah.
Except for maybe a portion with mixed-use development instead of townhouses.
Okay. I think that we perhaps want to speak positively of the concept without endorsing it, because, as you said, it's not, their concept of the village green isn't necessarily what we were trying to get to. But we should maybe say something generally positive about the concept of the village green. Does that sound reasonable, Joy?
I think we should leave it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
I think what you've added is the right emphasis.
Okay. I think generally it looks good. Other comments?
No comments.
Looks good.
Okay,
Good.
thank you. Yes,
Well, thank you very much, and we appreciate your waiting until this late in the evening when we, because of all the other items that we had to take up.
I don't think I've ever been this lonely here.
Well, that's because everybody's sitting home watching it on the, either on the cable or on their computer. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned.